At dinner, my son-in-law threw a bowl of hot lobster bisque in my face and smiled, saying that is exactly what I deserved. My own daughter looked at me with soup dripping from my chin onto my old flannel shirt and said, "He is right. Dad, you really need to learn your place." I said nothing. I did not scream. I did not fight back. I just wiped my burning face with a linen napkin and walked out the door. But before I even reached the elevator, I made one quick phone call that would turn their entire world into dust. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family members who mistook your kindness for weakness. My name is Langston Barnes. I am 68 years old, and to the naked eye, I look like nothing more than a retired mechanic who spent too many years under the hood of a car. I drive a beat-up Ford F-150 that has more rust than paint. I wear work boots that have seen better decades, and my hands are permanently stained with the ghost of engine grease. When people see me, they see a man who barely scraped by. They see a man who probably relies on Social Security checks to keep the lights on. And I never corrected them. I never corrected my daughter, Nia, and I certainly never corrected her husband, Brad. What they do not know, what nobody knows except my lawyer and the IRS, is that I am the sole owner of Barnes Logistics. Those 18-wheelers you see dominating the highways on the East Coast, the shipping containers stacking up at the ports in Baltimore and Newark, that is me. I built an empire with these greasy hands, starting with a single delivery van 40 years ago. But I learned a long time ago that in this country, a black man with visible wealth puts a target on his back, so I moved in silence. I accumulated millions while living like I had hundreds. I did it to protect my family, especially after my wife Etta passed away 5 years ago. But tonight, that silence ended. It was supposed to be a celebratory dinner. Brad had invited me to the penthouse apartment that overlooks the city skyline. He loved that apartment. He loved standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the city like he owned it. He had no idea that he did not own it. I did. Through a shell company and a trust, I was the one paying the $5,000 monthly lease because Nia had cried to me years ago that they needed a good address for Brad's image. I sat at the far end of the mahogany dining table, feeling the cold air conditioning prickle my skin through my thin flannel shirt. Brad had invited 2 of his business associates, men in sharp navy suits with gold watches that cost more than my truck. They were drinking scotch that was older than my daughter. So Brad, one of the associates, said, leaning back and swirling his glass, "Tell us more about this acquisition. It sounds like a gold mine." Brad puffed out his chest, flashing that salesman's smile that always looked a little too tight. "It is a done deal, gentlemen," Brad lied smoothly. "I have the investors lined up. We are just waiting on the ink to dry. By next quarter, I will be running the whole division." I took a sip of water, keeping my eyes on the plate. I knew for a fact that Brad was not closing any deal. I knew he was on probation at his brokerage firm because my private investigator sends me a report every Friday morning. Brad was drowning in debt, maxing out credit cards to buy those suits, and using my daughter's credit score to lease his BMW. But I said nothing. I just cut into the dry chicken breast they had served me. Langston Brad's voice boomed across the table, snapping me out of my thoughts. I looked up. He was staring at me with a look of amusement, performing for his guests. "We are empty over here," Brad said, gesturing to the empty wine decanter. "Be a pal and run to the kitchen to open another bottle. The 96 Cabernet. And try not to break the cork this time." The table went quiet. The 2 associates exchanged awkward glances. It was a microaggression so sharp it could cut glass. He was not asking his father-in-law for a favor. He was ordering the help around. He wanted to show these white men that Brad held the leash in this house. I slowly placed my fork down. I looked at Nia, my beautiful Nia, who I had put through private school, who I had walked down the aisle, whose student loans I had secretly paid off the day she graduated. I looked at her, waiting for her to check her husband, waiting for her to say, "Brad, get it yourself, that is my father." But Nia just swirled her pasta with her fork, avoiding my eyes. "Go on, Dad," she mumbled. "You are closer to the kitchen anyway." The betrayal stung worse than the disrespect. I took a deep breath, channeling the patience Etta always told me to keep. "I am a guest, Brad," I said, my voice low and steady. "I am sure your legs work just fine." Brad's face turned a shade of crimson I had never seen before. His smile faltered. He felt his authority slipping in front of the men he was trying to impress. He stood up, swaying slightly. He had been drinking since noon. "Excuse me," Brad laughed, but it was a cold, jagged sound. "A guest. You think you are a guest?" You are a charity case, Langston. You are here because we allow you to be here. Because Nia feels sorry for you sitting alone in that shack you call a house. Brad Nia hissed, but she did not reach out to stop him. No, Nia, let's be real, Brad shouted, grabbing the heavy ceramic bowl of lobster bisque from the center of the table. It was still steaming. The chef had just brought it out. This man contributes nothing, Brad spat, looming over me. He sits here drinking my scotch, eating my food, and he cannot even pour a glass of wine. You are useless, old man. You are a leech. I looked him dead in the eye. I did not flinch. I did not cower. You are drunk, Brad, I said calmly. Sit down before you do something you cannot undo. That was the trigger. The calm in my voice made him feel small, and a small man with a big ego is the most dangerous thing on earth. This is my house, Brad screamed, and in this house you do what you are told. He swung his arm. It happened in slow motion. I saw the orange liquid arc through the air. I saw the steam rising off it, and then impact. The hot soup hit me full in the face. It splashed into my eyes, blinding me for a second. It soaked into my gray beard and dripped down onto my flannel shirt. The heat was intense, searing my skin, but the shock was colder than ice. I sat there frozen. A piece of lobster meat slid down my cheek and landed in my lap. The silence in the room was deafening. The two business associates looked horrified, one of them half rising from his chair, as if to intervene. But Brad was panting, a twisted look of satisfaction on his face. That is what you deserve, he sneered. Maybe that will wake you up. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, blinking away the sting. I looked at my daughter. My Nia. Surely now she would scream. Surely now she would throw him out. Nia looked at me, then at Brad, then at the shocked guests. She saw the social disaster unfolding, and her instinct was not to protect her father, but to salvage the dinner. You shouldn't have provoked him, Dad Nia said, her voice trembling but accusing. You know how stressed he is about this deal. He is right. You need to learn your place. You embarrassed him. I felt something break inside my chest. It was the last thread of the promise I had made to Etta on her deathbed. Keep the peace, Langston, she had whispered. Nia is all we have left. Protect her even from herself. For 5 years, I had honored that. I had let them treat me like a ATM machine that they didn't know the PIN code to, tolerating their insults while I secretly paid their rent, their car notes, their vacations, all through anonymous gifts and shell companies, so they would never know it was me. I wanted them to build their own character. But tonight the soup didn't just stain my shirt. It washed away the promise. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. I did not wipe the soup off my shirt. I let it drip. I wanted them to see it. I wanted them to remember this image. I looked at the two guests. Gentlemen, I said, my voice steady as a diesel engine. I apologize for the interruption. Enjoy your meal. Then I looked at Brad. He was still standing there, chest heaving, waiting for me to yell, waiting for a fight he could win physically because he was 30 years younger. But I gave him nothing. I gave him the silence of a grave. I turned to Nia. She refused to meet my gaze. Goodbye, Nia, I said. I turned and walked toward the door. My heavy boots thudded against the expensive flooring. He is walking away. Brad laughed behind me, trying to regain the room. Run along home to your shack, Langston. Don't let the door hit you. I stepped out into the hallway and the heavy oak door clicked shut behind me, muffling their laughter. I walked to the elevator and pressed the button. While I waited, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. It was an old model Simple, but it had one number on speed dial that mattered. I brought the phone to my ear. It rang once. Yes, Mr. Barnes, a sharp female voice answered. It was Monica Lewis, my general counsel, and the only person who knew where every single body was buried. Monica, I said. My voice was calm, but Monica had worked with me for 20 years. She heard the edge. She heard the war. What do you need, Langston? She asked. I stepped into the elevator as the doors slid open. I caught my reflection in the mirrored walls, an old black man covered in orange soup eyes, red-looking broken, but the man inside was ready to burn it all down. Initiate Protocol 0, I said. There was a pause on the line. Protocol 0 was the nuclear option. It was the contingency plan we had drawn up years ago in case I ever decided to cut the cord completely. It meant total severance, total exposure, total destruction of the financial safety net I had woven around them. Are you sure? Monica asked softly. It is, Nia. I am sure I said, watching the floor numbers count down. They threw soup in my face, Monica. And Nia watched, understood. Monica said, her voice shifting into combat mode. I will make the calls. By tomorrow morning, their world will look very different. Do it, I said, immediately. I hung up the phone as the elevator doors opened to the lobby. The doorman, a young man named Marcus, who I often tipped $100 when nobody was looking, saw the soup on my shirt and gasped. Mr. Barnes, are you okay? Did something happen? I am fine, Marcus, I said, walking past him into the cool night air. Just taking out the trash. I got into my rusted Ford F-150. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned lighter. The smell of lobster bisque was pungent and sickly sweet in the cab. They thought they had humiliated a poor old man. They thought they had put a servant in his place. They had no idea they had just declared war on the landlord, the bank, and the judge. I started the engine. It roared to life, a deep guttural growl that echoed in the parking garage. Tomorrow Brad would try to buy a coffee. Tomorrow Nia would try to swipe her card at the salon. Tomorrow they would try to enter the lobby of the building I owned. And tomorrow they would learn that the man they threw soup at was the man holding the spoon that fed them. I pulled out onto the street, the city lights blurring past me. I wasn't going back to my shack. I was going to my main estate, the one in the hills they didn't know existed, to shower, change into a suit, and watch their empire of cards crumble from the comfort of my real life. The game was over. The lesson had begun. The sun rose over the city the next morning, casting a golden light on the skyscrapers and the luxury boutiques that lined the avenues. I was sitting on the terrace of my real home, a sprawling estate tucked away in the quiet hills, drinking a cup of Ethiopian coffee and reading the digital report my head of security had just sent over. While I enjoyed the silence of the morning, my son-in-law Brad was about to walk into a buzzsaw I had sharpened specifically for him. He woke up in the penthouse I paid for, put on a suit I paid for, and decided the best way to recover from the humiliation of the previous night was to spend money he did not earn. He dragged Nia to a high-end Italian furniture showroom downtown. It was the kind of place where they do not put price tags on the items because if you have to ask, you are in the wrong store. Brad strode in like he owned the block. He was loud. He was aggressive. He wanted to reassert his dominance after I had walked out on him. He pointed to a hand-stitched leather sectional sofa that cost $50,000. It was excessive. It was arrogant. It was exactly the kind of purchase a man makes when he feels small. Wrap it up, Brad told the sales associate, snapping his fingers. We want it delivered by Tuesday. And throw in the matching ottoman. The sales associate, a polite young man who likely worked on commission, nodded enthusiastically. He led them to the counter. Brad pulled out his wallet. He bypassed the regular credit cards and pulled out the heavy black titanium card. He loved that card. He flashed it at bars. He dropped it onto dinner tables with a heavy clatter. He thought it was a symbol of his success. He did not know it was a supplementary card issued under the corporate account of Barnes Logistics, with a spending limit I controlled from an app on my phone. He handed the card over with a smug grin. The associate swiped it. There was a pause. The associate frowned and swiped it again. Then he looked up. His face pale. I am sorry, sir, the associate said. The card has been declined. Brad laughed. It was a loud, incredulous bark. Declined. Do you know who I am? Do you know what the limit is on that card? Run it again. Your machine must be broken. The associate tried again. He typed in the numbers manually. The result was the same. A harsh beep followed by a red light on the terminal. Sir, it says the account has been suspended by the primary cardholder, the associate said, his voice dropping to a whisper to avoid embarrassing the client. But Brad did not have the grace to be embarrassed quietly. He slammed his hand on the marble counter. I am the primary cardholder, Brad shouted. This is ridiculous. Do you have any idea how much business I bring to this city? People in the showroom began to turn around. Shoppers pretending to look at fabric swatches were now watching the show. Brad's face was turning that familiar shade of crimson. He turned to Nia, who was standing a few feet away, looking at a vase to avoid the scene. Nia, give me your card, Brad snapped. The bank is obviously having a glitch. We will sort it out later. Nia hesitated. She opened her designer purse and pulled out her platinum card. This card was also linked to my accounts. I had given it to her when she graduated college for emergencies. She used it for spa days and designer shoes. She handed it to the associate. Her hand was trembling slightly. She knew something was wrong. She remembered the look in my eyes the night before. The associate swiped Nia's card. The machine beeped again, declined. This time the associate did not whisper. He looked at the screen, then at the couple, then reached for the phone on the counter. "I am sorry, ma'am," the associate said, pulling the card back. "The system message says, this card has been reported stolen. I have to retain it." "Stolen," Nia gasped. Her eyes went wide. "No, that is my card. My father gave it to me." Brad snatched the phone from the associate's hand before he could dial security. He dialed the number on the back of his own black card. He put it on speakerphone, wanting to publicly shame the bank for their error. He wanted the whole store to hear him berate the customer service representative. The line connected. "This is Brad Miller," he shouted into the phone. "Why are my cards being declined? I am standing in a store trying to make a purchase and you are making me look like a fool." The voice on the other end was calm, professional, and amplified clearly through the speaker for everyone in the quiet showroom to hear. "Mr. Miller," the representative said, "I see here that the primary account holder, Mr. Langston Barnes, reported all authorized user cards as lost or compromised this morning. He has flagged all activity from your location as fraudulent." The silence in the showroom was absolute. The other shoppers were no longer pretending to look at furniture. They were holding up their phones. They were recording. "That is a lie," Brad screamed at the phone. "He is just a mechanic. He does not control my accounts." "Sir," the representative continued, her voice cutting through his hysteria, "the account is under Barnes Logistics. Mr. Barnes has removed you as an authorized user. He also left a note on the file." Brad froze. "A note?" "Yes, sir. The note reads, 'The free ride is over.'" Brad dropped the phone. It clattered against the glass countertop. He looked around. He saw the phones pointed at him. He saw the sales associate looking at him not with respect but with pity and suspicion. He saw the security guard at the door taking a step forward, hand resting on his belt. Nia covered her face with her hands. She was crying. The humiliation was total. They were not the power couple of the city. They were frauds with plastic they could not use. Brad grabbed Nia's arm, his grip bruising. "We are leaving," he hissed. They stormed out of the showroom, leaving the $50,000 sofa and their dignity behind. But Brad was not done. His ego had been fractured, and when a man like Brad is hurt, he lashes out. He needed a target. He needed someone to blame. He dragged Nia to his leased BMW in the parking lot. "We are going to his house," Brad raged as he started the engine. "We are going to that shack in the suburbs. I am going to teach that old man a lesson. He thinks he can humiliate me. He thinks he can cut me off. I will tear that place apart brick by brick until he turns the money back on." Nia sobbed in the passenger seat. "Brad, maybe we should just call him. Maybe we should apologize." "Apologize?" Brad laughed, speeding through a red light. "I am going to make him apologize. He is senile. He does not know who he is messing with." They drove furiously toward the outskirts of the city, toward the small, modest neighborhood where I had lived for 40 years. They expected to find my rusted truck in the driveway. They expected to find a flimsy wooden door they could kick in. They expected to find a frightened old man they could bully into submission. But when they turned the corner onto my street, Brad slammed on the brakes. The house was there, the peeling paint was there, the overgrown oak tree was there, but something had changed. A chain-link fence had been erected around the perimeter overnight. It was temporary but heavy-duty, the kind used around construction sites or crime scenes. A thick steel chain held the driveway gate shut, and standing in front of that gate were 3 men. They were not local police. They were not neighborhood watch. They were wearing tactical black uniforms with the insignia of a private security firm that charged $500 an hour. They were broad, they were stone-faced, and they were armed. Brad stared through the windshield. He blinked, trying to process the image. This did not match the narrative in his head. Mechanics do not have private military contractors guarding their driveways. "Get out of the car," Brad told Nia. "Tell them who you are." They got out. Brad marched up to the lead guard, a man who looked like he ate iron for breakfast. "Hey," Brad shouted, trying to summon the arrogance he had lost at the furniture store. "Open this gate. We need to see Langston." The guard did not move. He did not blink. He stood with his arms crossed over his chest, his eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. "This is private property," the guard said. His voice was deep and flat. "You are trespassing. I am family," Brad yelled, pointing at Nia. "This is his daughter. Tell him Nia is here. Tell him she wants to speak to her father." Nia stepped forward, wiping her tears. "Please," she said, her voice shaking. "I just want to talk to my dad. I know he is in there. Please let us in." The guard slowly lowered his sunglasses. He looked at Nia. He looked at her designer dress, her expensive handbag, and the desperation in her eyes. He did not see a daughter. He saw a liability. He consulted a clipboard he was holding. He ran his finger down a list. "I have strict orders from Mr. Barnes," the guard said. "What orders?" Brad demanded. "To let us in." The guard looked directly at Brad, then shifted his gaze to Nia. He delivered the message with the cold precision of a hammer hitting a nail. "The orders are clear," the guard said. "Mr. Barnes has no daughter." Nia gasped as if she had been physically struck. She staggered back, grabbing Brad's arm for support. "That is insane," Brad shouted. "Of course he has a daughter. She is standing right here." The guard stepped forward, his hand resting near the taser on his belt. "Mr. Barnes has no daughter," the guard repeated, his voice dropping an octave. "And he has no son-in-law. You have 5 seconds to remove your vehicle from the premises before we forcibly remove it for you. 1, 2. Brad looked at the guard. He looked at the other 2 men who had stepped forward, hands ready. He looked at the chain on the gate. For the first time, fear began to replace his anger. This was not a dispute. This was an erasure. He grabbed Nia and shoved her back toward the car. They scrambled inside, tires screeching as Brad threw the car into reverse. As they sped away, leaving the dust swirling in the air, the guard put his sunglasses back on and tapped his earpiece. "Target has been removed," the guard said. "Perimeter is secure." I watched the whole thing from a live feed on my tablet miles away in my library. I took a sip of my coffee. It was cold now, but it still tasted like justice. They thought they had hit rock bottom. They had no idea they had only just tripped over the edge. The fall was going to be much longer. Brad drove back to the city in a silence so thick it felt like it was choking the air inside the car. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel of the BMW he would soon learn he could no longer afford. Nia sat beside him, shivering, not from cold, but from a terrifying realization that the floor had just dropped out from under her life. They needed a win. They needed to feel powerful again. They needed to retreat to the one place where they felt like kings and queens. They headed for the penthouse. This apartment was their pride. It was a 3,000-square-foot glass box in the sky located in the most exclusive building in the financial district. Brad loved to tell people he bought it during a market dip. He loved to invite clients over and gesture expansively at the view while pouring drinks he did not pay for. He believed the lie so deeply that he had forgotten the truth. He had forgotten that he signed a lease agreement as a guest tenant 5 years ago. He had forgotten that the rent was paid by an anonymous trust. He was about to be reminded. They pulled up to the valet stand. Usually the valet would rush to open the door. Today the valet stand was empty. Brad honked the horn aggressively. Nothing happened. Cursing, he threw the car into park and stormed toward the revolving glass doors with Nia trailing behind him like a ghost. They marched to the private elevator bank reserved for the penthouse suites. This was Brad's favorite ritual. He loved tapping his key fob against the sensor and watching the doors slide open instantly. It was his daily validation. He slapped the fob against the reader. Nothing happened. No beep. No light. The doors remained shut tight. Brad tapped it again, harder this time. Still nothing. He looked at the fob, then at the reader. He rubbed the plastic against his sleeve and slammed it against the sensor. "Open," he growled, hitting the panel with his fist. Nia stepped up beside him. "Try mine," she whispered, pulling her keys from her purse. She tapped her fob. The result was the same. Dead silence. "Excuse me," Brad shouted across the lobby to the concierge desk. The concierge was a man named Elias, someone Brad had treated like furniture for 3 years. Brad had never learned his last name. He just snapped his fingers at him to get packages. Elias looked up from his computer. He did not smile. He did not rush over. He simply watched them with an unreadable expression. "Our keys are not working," Brad yelled, walking toward the desk. "Fix it. We need to go up." Elias did not type anything. He did not reach for a master key. He folded his hands on the marble counter. "The elevators are working perfectly," Mr. Miller, Elias said calmly. Your fobs have been deactivated. Deactivated, Brad laughed, but it was a high, panicked sound. Do you know who I am? I live in the penthouse. Reactivate them now or I will have your job by lunchtime. I cannot do that, Sir Elias replied. Management has locked out the unit pending an investigation into unauthorized occupancy. Unauthorized occupancy. Brad's face turned purple. I have lived here for 5 years. I am the owner. You are a tenant, Sir Elias corrected him without blinking. And the owner has revoked your access privileges effective immediately. Who is the owner? Brad slammed his hand on the desk. Tell me who it is, I will sue them. Elias looked down at a piece of paper on his desk. The owner is listed as the LB Trust. They left instructions that you are to be escorted to the service elevator if you wish to retrieve your personal effects. You have 1 hour. The LB Trust. Langston Barnes. My initials. Nia gasped. She grabbed Brad's arm. Brad, she said, her voice trembling. LB. It is Dad. Brad pulled his arm away. That is impossible, he spat. Your dad is a mechanic. He does not own a $10 million penthouse. This is a mistake. This is some kind of sick joke. He turned and ran toward the service elevator, jamming his finger into the button. He was going to go up there. He was going to prove this was a glitch. He was going to kick down the door if he had to. The service elevator was slow. It smelled of cleaning supplies and garbage. For a man like Brad, riding in it was an insult all on its own. When the doors finally opened on the 45th floor, he stormed out into the private hallway ready to scream at a maid or a super. Instead, he found a welcoming committee he did not expect. Standing in front of the double mahogany doors of the penthouse were 3 people. One was the building manager, a stern woman in a gray suit. Flanking her were 2 uniformed police officers with their hands resting on their utility belts. Brad stopped short. Nia bumped into his back. What is this? Brad demanded, pointing a shaking finger at them. Get away from my door. I am calling my lawyer. Mr. Miller, the building manager said, stepping forward. I am afraid that will not be necessary. I have been instructed to serve you with this. She handed him a thick envelope. Brad tore it open. Inside was a notice to quit, an immediate eviction order based on a violation of the lease terms regarding character and conduct, a clause I had inserted years ago just for this moment. It also stated that the guest privilege extended to the occupants had been formally withdrawn by the landlord. This is fake, Brad shouted, throwing the papers on the floor. I am not a guest. This is my home. Sir, one of the officers said, stepping forward. His voice was heavy and bored. He had done this 1,000 times. We have a signed affidavit from the property owner, Mr. Langston Barnes, stating you are trespassing. You have been given a grace period to collect essential items. That grace period started 10 minutes ago. Brad stared at the officer. He looked at the name on the paperwork. Barnes. My name was everywhere. It was on the deed. It was on the lease. It was on the eviction notice. The walls were closing in on him. The reality was starting to fracture his delusion. The man he had thrown soup at, the man he called useless, owned the roof over his head. I want to go inside, Nia sobbed. I need my clothes. I need my jewelry. The manager nodded to the officers. One of them tapped a key card against the lock. The light turned green. The heavy doors swung open. You have 20 minutes, the manager said. Take what you can carry. Anything left behind will be placed in storage at your expense. They scrambled inside. The apartment looked exactly as they had left it, pristine, luxurious, a monument to a life they hadn't earned. But now it felt like a museum they were being kicked out of. Brad ran to the bedroom. He grabbed a suitcase and started throwing in his suits, his watches, his Italian shoes. He was frantic. He was sweating. He was not packing. He was looting his own life. Nia ran to her closet. She was crying hysterically, pulling dresses off hangers, dropping them, stepping on them. She grabbed her jewelry box, dumping necklaces and rings into a duffel bag. Faster, the officer called from the hallway. 5 minutes. They ran back and forth, grabbing phone chargers, laptops, random knickknacks. They looked like thieves in the night. The dignity Brad prized so highly was gone. He was panting, his hair disheveled, clutching an armful of silk ties. Time is up, the officer announced, walking into the living room. Let's go. Wait, Brad yelled. I haven't got my golf clubs. I haven't got my espresso machine. Out, the officer said, pointing his baton toward the door. Now. They were herded out of the apartment, the door slammed shut behind them with a finality that echoed in the hallway. The sound of the lock engaging was the sound of their old life dying. They dragged their overstuffed suitcases to the elevator. The officers escorted them all the way down past the lobby, where the other residents watched with raised eyebrows and out the front doors. The officers did not gently place their bags on the curb. They tossed them. A Louis Vuitton suitcase hit the concrete and burst open, spilling Brad's expensive underwear onto the dirty sidewalk. A duffel bag rolled into a puddle. Because of course it had started to rain, it was not a light drizzle. It was a sudden torrential downpour that turned the sky gray and the streets into rivers. The city was washing them away. Brad stood there on the sidewalk staring at his scattered clothes. His suit was getting soaked. His hair was plastered to his forehead. Passers-by were stepping around them, some looking with curiosity, others with disgust. A homeless man they had ignored every day for 3 years watched them from a bus stop bench, laughing softly. Nia sat on her suitcase, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. She looked small. She looked broken. But Brad was not broken yet. He was furious. The humiliation had burned through his shock and ignited a rage so hot it kept him warm in the rain. He pulled his phone from his pocket. His wet fingers slipped on the screen as he dialed. He put the phone to his ear, pacing back and forth in the rain, kicking at his own clothes. I was sitting in my library, dry and warm. A fire was crackling in the hearth. I had a glass of 25-year-old whiskey in my hand and a Miles Davis record spinning on the turntable. The room was filled with the smooth, melancholic sound of a trumpet. My phone buzzed on the side table. I saw the name, Brad. I picked it up. I did not say hello. I just listened. You son of a bitch, Brad screamed. His voice was distorted by the wind and the rain, but the hate was crystal clear. You think you can do this to me? I will kill you. I will burn your house down. You are nothing. You are a dirty mechanic. I am going to sue you for everything you have. Answer me, old man. Answer me. I took a slow sip of my whiskey. The liquid was smooth and warm. I looked at the fire. I felt the weight of the crystal glass in my hand. I did not speak. I simply moved the phone closer to the record player. I let him hear the trumpet. I let him hear the soulful, complex notes of jazz filling the warm air of a home he would never step foot in again. Then I tapped the rim of my whiskey glass with my fingernail. Cling, cling. It was a delicate, expensive sound, the sound of comfort, the sound of victory. Then I ended the call. I powered off the phone and set it back on the table. Outside my window, the rain was falling on the gardens of my estate. Miles away on a cold city sidewalk, my son-in-law was screaming at a deadline surrounded by wet silk and ruin. The penthouse was gone. The credit was gone. But I was not done. I had taken their shelter. Now I was going to let them see the true face of the world they had tried to buy their way into. The neon sign outside the motel window buzzed with the sound of a dying fly casting a rhythmic, sickly red light into the cramped room. It was the kind of place where you paid by the hour, where the carpet felt sticky even through the soles of your shoes, and the air smelled permanently of stale cigarette smoke and desperation. This was where the power couple of the city had landed. Brad and Nia sat on the edge of a mattress that sagged in the middle, surrounded by their wet, ruined designer clothes. The heating unit in the corner rattled and coughed, blowing lukewarm air that smelled of dust. Brad was pacing the small space between the bed and the bathroom door. He had stripped off his soaked suit jacket and thrown it into the corner. His white dress shirt was translucent with rain clinging to his chest. He looked like a caged animal, but not a lion. He looked like a wet rat that had been cornered. "This is your fault," Brad shouted, kicking a duffel bag across the room. He pointed a shaking finger at Nia. "This is all your fault. You told me he was nobody. You told me he fixed carburetors for a living." Nia was curled into a ball on the bed, hugging her knees. Her mascara had run down her cheeks in dark streaks. She looked younger than she had in years, stripped of her arrogance, left with nothing but the raw pain of a child whose world had broken. "I did not know." Nia sobbed. "Mom always said he kept his money in a coffee can. I thought he was just lucky with the rent. I thought maybe he won a lottery years ago and was hoarding it." Lucky Brad laughed a harsh, ugly sound that bounced off the thin walls. You do not luck into owning a penthouse, Naya. You do not luck into having private military security on your payroll. He played us, he watched us struggle, and he laughed. And you let him. You sat there and let that useless old man destroy my reputation. He is not useless. Nia whispered, a tiny spark of defense rising in her throat. He is my father. He is a mechanic, Brad roared, looming over her. He is a grease monkey who got lucky with some investments, and now he thinks he can evict me. Me, I am a vice president at a brokerage firm. I handle millions of dollars. I am not some street trash he can toss into the rain. He grabbed the ice bucket from the dresser and hurled it against the wall. It shattered plastic shards raining down on the carpet. Naya flinched, burying her face in her hands. She was seeing the real Brad now. The Brad without the penthouse, without the credit limit, without the audience. He was not a king. He was a bully who only felt big when he was making someone else feel small. We are going to sue him, Brad ranted, pacing again. I will take everything. I will claim emotional distress. I will claim wrongful eviction. I will make him sell that rust bucket truck to pay my legal fees. But first we need money. How much cash do you have? Nia shook her head. I do not know. Maybe $40. $40, Brad mocked her. Fantastic. That will buy us breakfast at a diner. We are destitute, Nia. Because of your father. Because you could not control him. Because you are weak. He sat down in the single-stained armchair in the corner and stared at the wall, his jaw working furiously. He was running out of options, and when a parasite runs out of options, it starts looking for a new host. Or it starts looking for a weakness in the old one. Nia wiped her face with the back of her hand. She needed comfort. She needed something familiar. She reached for her waterlogged purse and pulled out a smaller plastic bag she had managed to save from the rain. It contained the few things she had grabbed in her panic at the penthouse. Jewelry, her passport, and a thick manila envelope she had taken from her safe. She had not even looked at what was inside. She just knew it was her mother's handwriting on the front. She opened the envelope, her hands trembling. She pulled out a stack of yellowed papers. It was old correspondence letters Etta had written to her but never sent, and at the bottom a copy of Etta's last will and testament. Nia had ignored this document for 5 years. She had been too busy spending the allowance I gave her to care about legal papers. She thought it just detailed who got Etta's jewelry. She started reading, tears blurring her vision. It was a letter from her mother, essentially. Etta talking about love, about family, about me. Brad watched her from the chair. What is that? He snapped. More sentimental garbage. It is Mom's will, Nia said softly. I never really read it. Brad rolled his eyes. Great. Maybe she left you a collection of porcelain dolls we can sell for $10. Nia ignored him. She turned the page. Her eyes scanned the legal text. She stopped at a paragraph near the end. Her breath hitched. Brad, she whispered. Look at this. What Brad asked, not moving. It says here that Mom owned 40% of the voting shares, Nia said, her finger tracing the line. 40% of the voting shares in Barnes Logistics, and she transferred them to Dad upon her death. Brad went still. The room went silent save for the buzzing of the neon sign. Barnes Logistics, Brad asked. His voice was different now. Quieter, sharper. Nia nodded. Barnes Logistics, is that a real company? Brad stood up. He walked over to the bed and snatched the papers from her hand. He did not care about the sentimental letters. He flipped straight to the asset declaration page. His eyes scanned the document, hungry and desperate. There it was in black and white. Etta Barnes, co-founder and shareholder of Barnes Logistics, a limited liability corporation registered in Delaware with assets valuing in the 9 figures. 9 figures. Brad's mouth fell open. The paper shook in his hand. He looked at Nia, his eyes wide with a mixture of greed and terror. Nia, he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. Barnes Logistics is not just a company. It is the company. They control the shipping lanes from Maine to Florida. They have contracts with the government. They have contracts with Amazon. He looked back at the paper. Langston Barnes. He ran to where his phone was charging on the rickety desk. The screen was cracked from when he dropped it in the rain, but it still worked. His fingers flew across the keyboard. He typed the name he had spoken with such contempt for 5 years. Langston Barnes. He hit search. The first result was not a mechanic shop. It was not a Facebook page for a retiree. It was an archived article from Forbes magazine dated 10 years ago. The headline read, "The Silent Giants, How America's Quietest Billionaires Move the World." And there on the cover was me. I was not wearing a flannel shirt. I was wearing a bespoke Italian suit that fit my broad shoulders perfectly. I was standing in front of a fleet of trucks, my arms crossed, staring into the camera with the same hard, unyielding look I had given Brad right before I walked out of the penthouse. Brad stared at the image. The color drained from his face until he looked like a ghost. He scrolled down. He read the net worth estimation. He read the biography. Self-made, ruthless negotiator. Philanthropist, known for extreme privacy and swift elimination of business threats. Brad dropped the phone on the bed as if it had burned him. He backed away, his hands in his hair. "Oh my God," Brad whispered. "He is a shark. He is a whale. Nia, your father is a titan." He looked at Nia, who was staring at the Forbes photo with confusion. She had never seen me in a suit like that. She had never seen that look in my eyes. "We threw soup at him," Brad said, his voice rising in pitch. "We threw soup at a man who could buy the bank that holds my debt and foreclose on me for sport. We insulted him. We evicted ourselves." He began to hyperventilate. The reality of his situation crashed down on him. He had not just annoyed a father-in-law. He had declared war on a man who moved mountains for a living. He realized why the credit cards were black. He realized why the penthouse was paid for. He realized that every luxury he had enjoyed was a crumb dropped from my table. And he had just flipped the table over. Brad looked at the door of the motel room as if expecting a SWAT team to burst in. He was terrified. But then the gears in his survivor's brain began to turn. He looked at the papers. He looked at Nia. He realized that Nia was the only link he had left to that empire. She was the bloodline. She was the weakness. He could not fight me. He knew that now. I would crush him. But he could use her. The transformation was instant and terrifying. The abuser vanished. The bully disappeared. In their place stood the charming, loving husband Nia had fallen for. Brad rushed to the bed and fell to his knees in front of Nia. He grabbed her hands, burying his face in her palms. "Nia, baby, I am so sorry," Brad cried. His tears seemed real. His shaking seemed real. "I was so scared. I was so stressed. I took it out on you and your dad. I am a monster." Nia looked down at him, confused by the sudden shift. "Brad." "I did not know." Brad sobbed, looking up at her with pleading puppy eyes. "I did not know he was carrying all this burden. He must be so lonely, Nia. He built all this for you, for us, and we treated him like dirt." He squeezed her hands tight. "We have to make this right," Brad said urgently. "Not for the money. I do not care about the money, but for family. He is your dad, Nia. We hurt him. We have to fix this. We have to go to him and beg for forgiveness. We have to show him we love him." Nia's face softened. She wanted to believe him. She wanted her husband back. She wanted her father back. "You really mean it?" Nia asked. "With all my heart," Brad lied, his mind already calculating the next move. "We are going to go to his office tomorrow. We are going to apologize. We are going to be the family he deserves." He hugged her tight, burying his face in her neck so she could not see his expression. Over her shoulder, his eyes were fixed on the Forbes article on the phone screen. He was not looking at a father-in-law. He was looking at a target. He had failed to bully the mechanic. Now he was going to con the billionaire. He held her there in the dirty motel room, plotting his way back into the penthouse while outside the rain continued to wash away the city's grime, unaware that the dirtiest thing in town was sitting right there on that sagging mattress. The next morning, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of my office on the 40th floor, looking down at the ants scurrying along the pavement. My headquarters was a fortress of glass and steel located in the heart of the logistics district. Trucks bearing my name lined up at the loading docks like soldiers in formation. It was an empire built on grit and diesel, and down on the sidewalk, two very small people were about to realize just how big it truly was. I watched them step out of a taxi. Brad and Nia looked like ghosts of their former selves. Their clothes were wrinkled from the suitcases they had dragged out of the penthouse. Brad was wearing a suit, but the jacket was stained, and the shirt was unbuttoned at the collar. Nia looked terrified, clutching his arm as they stared up at the building. I could see the greed ignite in Brad's eyes even from this distance. He wasn't looking at a workplace. He was looking at a bank vault he intended to crack. They entered the lobby. I turned to my monitor to watch the security feed. The lobby of Barnes Logistics is intimidating by design. High ceilings, marble floors, and security guards who do not smile. Brad walked up to the reception desk. I could see him trying to straighten his tie, trying to summon that arrogant swagger he used on waiters and valets. I saw him speak to the receptionist, a sharp woman named Sarah, who had been with me for 10 years. Brad was gesturing wildly. He pointed at the elevators. He pointed at Nia. I pressed the intercom button to listen in. "I am telling you I am family!" Brad was shouting, his voice echoing off the marble. "Langston Barnes is my father-in-law. Call him. Tell him Brad and Nia are here." Sarah did not flinch. She typed something on her keyboard and looked up with a polite, bored expression. "Mr. Barnes has no appointments today, sir," Sarah said. "And his instructions regarding family are quite specific. He does not have any." Brad slammed his hand on the desk. "This is a mistake. We need to see him. It is an emergency." "Just let us up," security, Sarah said into her headset. 2 guards stepped forward. Brad shrank back. He looked at Nia, panic flashing across his face. They were about to be thrown out onto the street again. They were about to lose their only chance. I let them sweat for a full minute. I watched Brad's face cycle through rage, fear, and desperation. He was realizing that his name meant nothing here. His shouting meant nothing here. In my house, he was a nobody. Then I pressed the button on my desk phone. "Sarah," I said, "send them up." Sarah looked at the camera, surprised, but she nodded. "Mr. Barnes will see you," she told them. "Top floor. Do not make me regret this." They rode the elevator in silence. I could imagine the conversation happening in Brad's head. He was rehearsing his lines. He was preparing his performance. He was getting ready to play the role of the prodigal son, not because he was sorry, but because he was hungry. When the elevator doors opened directly into my suite, they stepped out hesitantly. The office was vast. The walls were lined with awards and models of ships and trucks. My desk sat at the far end, a massive slab of reclaimed oak. I sat behind it, my hands folded, my face a mask of stone. They walked the long distance to my desk. The carpet swallowed the sound of their footsteps. They looked small in the cavernous room. "Dad," Nia whispered. I did not answer. I just looked at them. Brad threw himself to his knees. It was a theatrical, desperate move. He dropped to the floor right in front of my desk, ignoring the dignity he usually prized so highly. He grabbed the edge of the wood with his hands. "Mr. Barnes." "Dad, please," Brad choked out. Tears were streaming down his face. I do not know if they were real, or if he could summon them on command, but they looked wet enough. "I am so sorry," Brad cried. I was out of my mind. The stress, the deal, falling through the pressure to provide for Nia. I snapped. I did not mean what I said. I did not mean to throw the soup. It was an accident. I swear on my mother's life it was an accident. He was gaslighting me. He was rewriting history less than 48 hours after it happened. He was blaming stress. He was blaming the world. He was taking zero responsibility for the malice in his heart. I looked at Nia. She was standing behind him, crying softly. "Dad, please," she sobbed. "We have nowhere to go. We slept in a motel last night. We have no money. Brad is sorry. He really is. He loves you. He respects you. We just want to be a family again." I stayed silent. I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable, until the only sound was Brad's jagged breathing. I looked at the spot on my desk where Brad's hands were clutching the wood. I remembered the heat of the lobster bisque on my face. I remembered the laughter. "You respect me," I said finally. My voice was low, devoid of warmth. "Yes, yes, more than anyone," Brad said, nodding frantically. "You are a titan." I see that now. I was blind. I was stupid. Please give me a chance to make it right. I will do anything. I will work for you. I will earn your trust back. He said the magic words. I will work for you. He thought that meant I would give him an executive office. He thought that meant I would put him in a suit and give him a title like Vice President of Operations. He thought he could charm his way into the boardroom. I opened the drawer of my desk. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a standard employment contract, freshly printed. I slid it across the desk toward him. Brad looked at it. He scrambled up from his knees, wiping his eyes, a look of hope dawning on his face. He thought he had won. He thought the con had worked. "Thank you, Dad." Brad said, reaching for a pen. You will not regret this. I have so many ideas for the brokerage division. I can optimize your... Read it, I said. Brad stopped. He looked down at the paper. His eyes scanned the header, then the job title, then the salary. His smile vanished. The color drained from his face. His hands started to shake again. Sanitation associate Brad read aloud. His voice was a whisper. Janitor, I corrected him. And warehouse cleaner. He looked up at me. His eyes were wide with shock. What? Brad asked. You said you wanted to work, I said, leaning back in my chair. You said you wanted to earn my trust. This is the only position available for a man with your resume and your character. The job description is detailed, I continued. You will report to the warehouse manager at 5 in the morning. You will sweep the floors. You will clean the bathrooms used by the drivers. You will organize the pallets. And you will do it for minimum wage. Brad stared at me. I could see the rage building behind his eyes. I could see the entitlement screaming to be let out. He wanted to tear the paper up. He wanted to throw it in my face, but he couldn't. He was broke. He was homeless. And he knew that I was the only game in town. And Nia. Brad asked, his voice tight. Nia works too, I said. Same position, same pay. You will work together. You will sweat together. And maybe after a year, if you haven't quit and you haven't complained, we can talk about family dinner. But Dad, Nia cried, cleaning bathrooms. I can't do that. You watched your husband throw hot soup in my face, I said to her. You watched him humiliate me. You have 2 hands and a strong back. You can clean. I looked at Brad. He was staring at the pen. He was trapped. If he walked away, he had nothing. If he signed, he became the servant of the man he tried to master. But then I saw a shift in his eyes, a dark, cold calculation. He realized that being a janitor got him inside the building. It got him a badge. It got him access. He wasn't thinking about cleaning. He was thinking about sabotage. He was thinking about the Forbes article. Sign it, I said, or get out of my office and never come back. Brad picked up the pen. He gripped it so hard I thought it would snap. He looked at me, and for a second the mask slipped. I saw the pure, unadulterated hatred in his eyes. He hated me more than he had ever hated anyone. Thank you for the opportunity, Sir, Brad said through gritted teeth. He signed his name. He pressed down hard, carving his signature into the paper like a scar. He handed the paper back to me. I took it. I checked the signature. Welcome to Barnes Logistics, I said. Report to the loading dock. Do not be late. Brad turned around without a word. He grabbed Nia's arm and led her out of the office. He walked stiffly like a soldier marching into enemy territory. He had signed the contract, but he had not signed a surrender. He had signed a declaration of war. I watched them leave. I put the contract in a file. I knew exactly what he was thinking. He thought he was a fox entering the henhouse. He didn't know he was a rat entering a maze I had designed specifically to trap him. I picked up my phone and called my head of security. They are hired, I said. Put a tracker on their badges, monitor every door they open, and make sure the warehouse manager knows to treat them exactly like everyone else. No favors, no mercy. I hung up. The real work was about to begin. They wanted my money. Now they were going to have to work for it, and while they scrubbed floors, I would be watching, waiting for them to make their move. And I knew they would. A man like Brad doesn't clean toilets for redemption. He cleans them to find a way to flush the owner down the drain. The smell of industrial bleach is something you never truly get out of your nose once it has settled there. For Brad and Nia, that smell became their entire world at 5 in the morning. I made sure of it. I watched from the gantry walkway high above the warehouse floor as my son-in-law, the man who used to wear $3,000 suits, struggled to push a heavy mop bucket across the concrete floor. He was wearing a gray jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big with his name stitched onto a patch on the chest. It was not a title. It just said Brad. The warehouse was alive with the morning shift. Forklifts beeped and zipped around corners carrying pallets stacked high with goods. Drivers were shouting orders over the roar of diesel engines. These were my people. These were men and women who had been with me for 20 years, people who had built Barnes Logistics with their sweat. They knew exactly who Brad and Nia were. I had not told them to be cruel, but I had not told them to be kind either. I simply told them that we had 2 new sanitation associates and that they were to be treated like anyone else who started at the bottom. Hey, new guy, A voice boomed across the loading dock. It was Big Mike, my floor foreman. He was a man the size of a vending machine with arms like tree trunks. He had zero patience for laziness. "You missed a spot over by Bay 4, Mike shouted, pointing a thick finger at a puddle of hydraulic fluid. "Stop leaning on that mop and put some back into it. We have trucks coming in 10 minutes. Brad stiffened. I saw his hands grip the mop handle until his knuckles turned white. He looked up at Mike with a flash of that old arrogance, opening his mouth to say something smart, something about how he used to manage portfolios. But then he looked around. He saw the other workers watching him. He saw the sheer size of Mike, and he saw the reality of his empty bank account. He swallowed his pride, or at least he swallowed the words. He dragged the bucket over to Bay 4 and started scrubbing. Nia was faring no better. She was in the break room, tasked with cleaning out the industrial coffee machines and wiping down the tables. I could see her through the glass walls. She was wearing rubber gloves that went up to her elbows, tears streaming down her face as she scrubbed dried coffee stains. Every time a driver walked in to get a cup, she flinched, turning her back so they would not recognize the princess who used to look down on them from the penthouse. One of the drivers, a woman named Patrice, who had raised 3 kids on her salary here, walked up to Nia. "Excuse me, honey," Patrice said, tapping Nia on the shoulder. "You are using the wrong spray for the counters. You need the blue bottle. The green one leaves streaks." Nia turned around, her eyes red and puffy. "Do I look like I care about streaks?" she snapped. "I should not even be here. My father owns this building." Patrice just laughed. It was a deep belly laugh. "Honey, Mr. Barnes owns the trucks, the building, and the land we are standing on," Patrice said. "But right now, he also owns your paycheck. So find the blue bottle or I am writing you up for incompetence." Nia threw the rag into the sink in a fit of temper, but she went to the supply closet. She found the blue bottle. She got back to work. It was humiliating for them. It was degrading. But it was honest work, and for the first time in their lives, they were earning their keep. However, as I watched Brad scrubbing the floor, I saw something in his posture that worried me. He was not defeated. He was angry. And a man like Brad does not channel anger into hard work. He channels it into revenge. During their lunch break, which they took sitting on crates near the back of the loading dock because nobody invited them to the break room tables, Brad made his move. He waited until the other workers had drifted away. He pulled a burner phone from his sock. I knew about the phone because my security team scanned everyone who entered the building, but I let him keep it. I needed to see who he would call. He huddled in the shadow of a shipping container, checking over his shoulder to make sure Mike was not watching. He dialed a number. I was listening in real time through the directional microphones installed in the loading bay. The audio was crystal clear in my office. "Connect me to Mr. Sterling," Brad whispered into the phone. "Tell him it is regarding Langston Barnes. Tell him I have the keys to the kingdom." Sterling. Of course. Arthur Sterling was my biggest competitor. A man who had inherited his logistics company from his father and ran it into the ground with bad decisions. He had been trying to steal my market share for a decade. He hated me because I was self-made and because I was black, and he hated that I consistently beat him on every government contract. I leaned forward in my chair, turning up the volume. Brad waited, tapping his foot nervously against the concrete. Then his voice changed. It became smooth, oily, the voice of the salesman he used to be. "Mr. Sterling," Brad said. "Thank you for taking my call. Yes, I am working inside Barnes Logistics now. No, nobody suspects a thing. The old man thinks he is punishing me. He thinks I am scrubbing floors." Brad laughed softly. It was a cold sound. "Listen, Arthur, I have access." Brad lied. "I am inside the perimeter. I can get you the client list, not just the public one. I can get you the VIP government contracts, the shipping routes, the pricing algorithms he uses to underbid you. Everything." He paused, listening to Sterling's response. "I want a position," Brad said firmly. "Director of Operations. And a signing bonus. 200,000. Cash. You get me that, and I will hand you Barnes Logistics on a silver platter." He listened again. "Tonight," Brad promised. "I am on the cleaning rotation for the administrative floor tonight. I will have access to the server room to empty the trash. That is all the time I need." He hung up the phone and slipped it back into his sock. He looked around the warehouse with a sneer. He looked at the workers at the trucks at the empire I had built. He did not see a business. He saw a carcass he could strip for parts. He stood up, brushed the dust off his jumpsuit, and walked back to his mop. He looked energized. He looked dangerous. He thought he had just brokered the deal of the century. I sat back in my chair. I took off my glasses and rubbed the bridge of my nose. The betrayal was absolute. I had given him a job. I had given him a chance to learn humility, and his first instinct was to sell me out to my enemy. But Brad had made a critical error. He assumed that because I started as a mechanic, I was unsophisticated. He assumed that because I wore flannel shirts, I did not understand technology. He did not know about my past. He did not know that before I fixed cars, I served in the Signal Corps. He did not know that I built the encryption for my company's database myself. I picked up my desk phone. Security, a voice answered. "Let him into the server room tonight," I said. "Sir," the head of security asked, confused. "You want us to grant access?" "Yes," I said. "Unlock the door when he approaches. Disable the alarm. Let him think he got lucky." "Understood, sir." I hung up. I pulled a bottle of water from my mini fridge. I needed to stay hydrated. It was going to be a long night. At 8 in the evening, the administrative offices were dark. The only light came from the emergency exit signs and the rhythmic sweep of the janitorial crew. Brad pushed his cleaning cart down the hallway of the executive floor. He was alone. Naya was downstairs cleaning the lobby bathrooms. He reached the heavy steel door marked "Authorized Personnel Only, Server Room." He looked around. The hallway was empty. He tried the handle. It clicked. The door swung open. Brad's eyes widened. He could not believe his luck. He slipped inside and closed the door behind him. The server room was cool and hummed with the sound of 1,000 hard drives spinning. Rows of black towers with blinking blue lights filled the room. This was the brain of Barnes Logistics. Brad abandoned his cart. He rushed to the main terminal console. He pulled a USB drive from his pocket. It was a high-capacity drive he must have smuggled in. He sat at the keyboard. The screen was locked, prompting a password. Brad reached into his other pocket and pulled out a small device, a keystroke logger he had probably bought online. He plugged it into the back of the tower, then plugged his USB drive into the front. He waited. He started typing basic commands, trying to bypass the login. He was not a hacker, but he knew enough to be dangerous. Suddenly, the screen flashed. A prompt appeared. "Administrator access granted." Brad gasped. He grinned in the dark room. The blue light from the monitor reflected in his eyes, making him look manic. He started dragging files. Client database Tier 1, shipping routes classified, pricing matrix 2024. He watched the progress bar fill up. Green, steady, fast. "I am going to destroy you, old man," Brad whispered to the screen. "I am going to take everything." I was watching him from my office 3 doors down. I had a bank of monitors on my wall. One showed Brad's face illuminated by greed. Another showed the screen he was looking at. And a third monitor showed the code running in the background of my system. Brad thought he was downloading my company's secrets. He thought he was stealing gold. He did not know what a honeypot was. He did not know that the files he was copying were fake. They were dummy files I had created years ago to trap corporate spies. The client names were fabricated. The shipping routes led to dead ends or competitors' warehouses. The pricing algorithms were mathematically flawed to guarantee a loss. But worse than that, the moment he plugged his USB drive into my system, he authorized a 2-way transfer. While he was taking my fake files, my system was uploading a little gift onto his drive, a tracker, a digital beacon, and a particularly nasty piece of malware that would execute the moment that drive was plugged into the Sterling Corporation network. I watched the progress bar on Brad's screen hit 100%. "Done," Brad hissed. He yanked the USB drive out. He put it in his pocket and patted it lovingly. He grabbed his cleaning spray and quickly wiped down the keyboard to remove his fingerprints as if that would matter. He slipped out of the room, closed the door, and grabbed his cart. He began to whistle as he mopped the hallway. He looked lighter. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery. I watched him go. I took a sip of my water. "Go ahead, Brad," I said to the empty room. "Run to Sterling. Give him the rope." He thought he had stolen my empire. He had no idea he had just become the carrier of a digital plague that would bring down my rival and send him to prison for corporate espionage. I turned off the monitors. I felt a deep, profound sadness. Not for the business. Business is war. I was sad because despite everything, despite the soup, despite the insults, I had hoped that maybe, just maybe, hard work would have humbled him. But some men are not built for work. They are built for theft. And thieves always eventually try to rob the wrong house. I packed up my briefcase. I was going home to sleep in my bed. Brad was going home to a motel to dream of millions. Tomorrow the nightmare would begin for him, and this time there would be no waking up. Brad thought he was walking into a coronation, but he was actually walking into a slaughterhouse. He left the warehouse that night with the USB drive burning a hole in his pocket, feeling heavier than the mop he had been pushing all day. He did not go back to the motel immediately. Instead, he took a taxi to the financial district to the glass tower that housed the Sterling Corporation. He walked in through the front doors not as a janitor, but with the swagger of a man who believed he held the future of the logistics industry in his hand. Arthur Sterling was waiting for him in a corner office that smelled of expensive leather and old money. Sterling was a man who had inherited everything and earned nothing, a soft man with hard eyes who hated me simply because I existed. He looked at Brad with a mixture of contempt and hunger. "Do you have it?" Sterling asked, not bothering to offer a drink or a seat. Brad pulled the drive from his pocket and placed it on the mahogany desk. It clicked against the wood. "Everything," Brad said, his voice trembling with adrenaline. "The entire client database, the government routes, the bidding algorithms for the next fiscal year. It is all there." Sterling picked up the drive. He looked at it greedily. "And the price?" Sterling asked. $200,000 in cash," Brad demanded, puffing out his chest. "And the position of Director of Operations, effective immediately." Sterling laughed. He opened a drawer and pulled out a metal briefcase. He threw it onto the desk. Brad opened it. Inside were stacks of $100 bills. It was more money than Brad had seen in months. It was his ticket back to the life he thought he deserved. "You start Monday," Sterling said, plugging the drive into his secure laptop. "Now get out. I have an empire to dismantle." Brad grabbed the briefcase. He did not care about the dismissal. He ran out of the building and hailed a cab back to the motel. When he burst into the room, Nia was sitting on the bed staring at the wall. He threw the briefcase onto the mattress and popped the latches. "Look at this!" Nia, Brad shouted, grabbing handfuls of cash and throwing them into the air. "We are back!" Nia looked at the money. Her eyes widened. For a moment, the fear and the shame vanished, replaced by the same greed that had corrupted her husband. She grabbed a stack of bills and held it to her chest. "Where did you get this?" Nia breathed. "I made a deal," Brad said, popping a bottle of cheap champagne he had bought at a gas station. "I sold the old man out. We are going to be rich again, Nia. I am going to be a director. We are getting the penthouse back. We are getting the cars back. We are going to crush him." They spent the night celebrating in that dirty room, drinking cheap wine and counting the money over and over again. They planned their return to society. They talked about the clothes they would buy and the parties they would throw. They fell asleep dreaming of revenge, unaware that they were sleeping on a landmine. The next morning, the chaos began. It started slowly at the Sterling Corporation headquarters. Their dispatchers received a new set of routing instructions allegedly downloaded from my secret files. These routes were supposed to be the most efficient, cost-saving paths for high-value cargo. Sterling ordered his fleet to switch to these new protocols, immediately eager to undercut my delivery times. At 9 in the morning, 50 of Sterling's trucks carrying millions of dollars in electronics and pharmaceuticals diverted from the highway. They followed the GPS coordinates extracted from the USB drive. Instead of arriving at distribution centers or ports, the trucks began to arrive at dead ends. 10 trucks were routed to an abandoned carnival ground in the middle of a swamp in New Jersey. Another 20 were sent to a federal nature preserve where heavy vehicles were strictly prohibited, resulting in immediate impoundment by park rangers. 5 trucks carrying perishable food were directed to a recycling plant that had been closed for 3 years. The drivers were calling in confused and angry. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4." One driver yelled over the radio. "You sent me to a cornfield. There is no warehouse here, just cows." Sterling was in his command center watching the GPS dots on the big screen scatter like marbles dropped on a tile floor. He was screaming at his logistics manager. "What is happening?" Sterling roared. "These are Barnes's routes. They are supposed to be gold." But the routes were not gold. They were garbage. I had spent years designing that fake database, creating a labyrinth of logistical nightmares specifically for a moment like this. And then the second phase of the trap activated. The pricing algorithm Brad had stolen was integrated into Sterling's automatic bidding software. At 10 o'clock, the federal government opened bidding for a massive defense transport contract. Sterling's system, using my corrupted code, automatically placed a bid. It bid $1. The system locked the bid in. Sterling won the contract immediately. but because the bid was binding, he was now legally obligated to transport millions of tons of military equipment for the grand total of $1 single. The fuel costs alone would bankrupt his quarterly earnings. Sterling watched the notification flash on his screen. Contract awarded. Value $1. He turned pale. He grabbed the phone to call his legal team to claim it was a glitch to get out of it. That was when the screen went black. Every monitor in the command center flickered and died. Then a single image appeared on every screen in the building. It was a pixelated image of a laughing skull wearing a mechanic's cap. The malware I had embedded on the drive had woken up. It was aggressive. It bypassed their firewalls, which Brad's credentials had helpfully lowered and encrypted their entire hard drive. Customer data payroll shipping manifests everything was locked behind 256-bit encryption. A message scrolled across the bottom of the screens. Unauthorized access detected. System lockdown initiated. Courtesy of Barnes Logistics. The room erupted into panic. Phones were ringing off the hooks. Clients were screaming. Drivers were stranded. The government was calling about the $1 contract. Arthur Sterling stood in the middle of the apocalypse. He looked at the USB drive still plugged into his laptop. He realized then that he hadn't stolen my secrets. He had invited my Trojan horse into his castle, and he knew exactly who had brought it to him. Back at the motel, Brad was in the shower washing off the grime of the warehouse, singing to himself. He was scrubbing away the janitor and preparing to put on the suit of a director. He stepped out of the bathroom, a towel around his waist. His phone was buzzing on the nightstand. It was buzzing so hard it was dancing across the wood. He picked it up. He saw the caller ID. Mr. Sterling. Brad grinned. He thought Sterling was calling to congratulate him. He thought this was the call about his signing bonus. "Good morning," Arthur. Brad answered smoothly. "I assume the data was to your liking." There was a silence on the other end. A heavy breathing silence that made the hair on Brad's arms stand up. "You are a dead man," Sterling whispered. His voice was low and trembling with a rage so profound it sounded inhuman. Brad's smile faltered. "Excuse me! You set me up!" Sterling screamed, the volume exploding so loud Nia jumped on the bed. "You gave me poison. My trucks are in swamps. My system is fried. I just lost $20 million in an hour." Brad's knees gave out. He sat heavily on the bed. "What? No, that is impossible. I got the files from the server room. I used the admin login." "You gave me a virus," Sterling roared. "You and that old man played me. I know you are working together. I know this was a setup." "No," Brad cried, terror gripping his throat. "I hate him. I stole it. I swear I do not care," Sterling shouted. "Send the money back. Now. And then you better run, Brad, because I am sending people to find you, and when they find you, they are going to break every bone in your body." "You do not cross, Arthur Sterling." The line went dead. Brad stared at the phone. The color had drained from his face until he looked like a corpse. He looked at the briefcase of money. It wasn't a prize anymore. It was a death sentence. He looked at Nia. She was looking at him with wide, terrified eyes. "What happened?" she whispered. He knew. Brad said, his voice hollow. "Your father knew. He let me steal it. He put a virus on the drive." He stood up and started pacing, hyperventilating. "He is a monster. He destroyed Sterling. And now Sterling is going to kill me." "We have to give the money back," Nia said, reaching for the briefcase. "We can't," Brad yelled. "If I go back there, he will kill me on the spot. We have to run." He started throwing clothes into his bag. But then he stopped. A look of pure, unadulterated madness crossed his face. He was trapped. Sterling wanted him dead. I wanted him in prison. He had nowhere to go. And when a narcissist is cornered, he does not reflect. He destroys. He turned to Nia. His eyes were wild. "No," Brad said. "I am not running. If I am going down, I am taking him with me. I am going to hurt him where it matters." "What are you talking about?" Nia asked, shrinking back. "The gala," Brad said. "The charity gala." Tonight was the night of the Barnes Foundation annual gala. It was the biggest social event of the season. Senators, judges, and business tycoons would be there. It was the night I honored my wife's memory. It was the night I presented myself as a pillar of the community. Brad grabbed his suit jacket. He wasn't thinking about safety anymore. He was thinking about humiliation. He wanted to do to me what I had done to him at the penthouse. He wanted to strip me naked in front of my peers. He is going to be on that stage, Brad hissed. He is going to be playing the saint. I am going to go there. I am going to take this briefcase, and I am going to tell everyone the truth. What truth? Nia cried. That you stole from him. That he set me up, Brad shouted. That he engaged in corporate sabotage. That he is a criminal. I will make a scene so big the news cameras won't be able to look away. I will ruin his reputation. If I burn, he burns. He grabbed Nia's arm. Get dressed, he ordered. We are going to a party. Nia tried to pull away. Brad, this is suicide. Let's just leave. You are coming with me. Brad screamed, his grip tightening. You are my wife. You are going to stand next to me and you are going to back me up. We are going to finish this. He dragged her toward the door. Brad was no longer the slick broker. He was a desperate man with a briefcase full of stolen cash and a heart full of hate marching toward a destruction he could not comprehend. He thought he was playing an ace. He did not know he was walking into the final act of a play I had written just for him. I was waiting for him at the gala, and I had the microphone ready. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was alive with the hum of power and the scent of expensive perfume. This was the night of the Barnes Foundation annual gala, an event I hosted every year to honor the memory of my late wife, Etta. The room was filled with 500 of the most influential people in the state. There were senators shaking hands with tech moguls, judges laughing with philanthropists, and old money families mingling with new titans of industry. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow over the sea of tuxedos and evening gowns. A string quartet played softly in the corner, providing a soundtrack of elegance and order. I stood at the podium on the main stage, adjusting the microphone, looking out at the sea of faces that respected me not for my money, but for my character. I was wearing a midnight blue tuxedo. My beard trimmed my posture straight. I looked nothing like the mechanic in the flannel shirt. I looked like the king of my castle, but I knew the gates were about to be breached. I had left the employee entrance access active for a reason. I knew Brad possessed two things in abundance: arrogance and stupidity. He still had his janitorial access badge in his pocket, and I knew he would not be able to resist the urge to crash the party. I had instructed my security team to let them in. I wanted them here. I wanted an audience for the final act. I saw movement near the kitchen service doors to my left. The heavy double doors swung open and two figures stumbled into the pristine ballroom. It was Brad and Nia. They looked like refugees from a shipwreck. Brad was wearing a suit that was wrinkled and stained from the rain and the cheap motel floor. His tie was crooked. His eyes were wild and bloodshot, and he was clutching the metal briefcase to his chest like a shield. Nia trailed behind him, wearing a dress that was too casual for the occasion, her face pale and streaked with fresh tears. The murmur of the crowd died down as heads began to turn. People whispered behind their hands. Who were these intruders? Why did they look so desperate? Brad did not care about the whispers. He saw me on the stage, bathed in the spotlight, and his face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. He pushed past a waiter carrying a tray of champagne, sending glasses crashing to the floor. The sound of breaking glass silenced the string quartet. Brad marched down the center aisle, dragging Nia by the wrist. He looked deranged. He looked like a man who had nothing left to lose and wanted to burn the world down with him. He climbed the stairs to the stage, panting heavily. My head of security stepped forward to intercept him, but I raised my hand. Let him speak. Brad grabbed the microphone stand, wrestling it away from me. The feedback squealed through the speakers, causing the guests to cover their ears. Listen to me, Brad screamed, his voice cracking. This man is a fraud. Langston Barnes is a criminal. The crowd gasped. The silence was absolute. Brad grinned maniacally. He thought he had them. He thought he was winning. He slammed the briefcase onto the podium and popped the latches. He grabbed a stack of $100 bills and waved them in the air. He set me up. Brad shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. He paid me to steal from his competitor. He engaged in corporate sabotage. He destroyed the Sterling Corporation and tried to frame me for it. He is not a philanthropist. He is a monster who destroys his own family for sport. Nia stood a few feet away, her head bowed, unable to look at the crowd. Brad continued his rant, his confidence growing with every second of silence. He evicted his own daughter, Brad yelled. He forced us to live in a motel. He cut off our money because he enjoys watching us suffer. Look at him. He stands there in his tuxedo acting like a saint, but he has ice in his veins. I stood calmly to his right, my hands clasped behind my back. I watched him unravel. I watched him dig his own grave with his words. He was accusing me of the very crimes he had committed. He was projecting his own moral rot onto me, and he was doing it in front of the district attorney, the police commissioner, and the mayor. "Are you finished, Brad?" I asked calmly, my voice not amplified but carrying in the dead silence of the room. "I am finished when you are in handcuffs," Brad spat. I nodded slowly. I looked up at the projection booth at the back of the ballroom. I gave a subtle nod to my technician. "Turn around, Brad," I said. Brad frowned. "Why?" "Look at the screen," I said. Brad turned. Behind us, the massive projection screen that had been displaying the logo of the foundation flickered. The image changed. It was no longer a static logo. It was a video. The video was grainy and black and white, shot from a hidden camera with night vision. It showed the interior of a cramped motel room. The timestamp in the corner read "yesterday." The voice of Brad filled the ballroom, amplified by the massive sound system. "This is your fault," the video, Brad screamed. He was throwing a lamp against the wall. He was advancing on Nia, who was cowering on the bed. "You are weak. You are useless, just like your father." The crowd in the ballroom let out a collective gasp of horror. They watched as the man on stage who claimed to be a victim verbally battered his wife on screen. They saw the rage. They saw the abuse. Nia covered her mouth with her hand, tears streaming down her face as she watched her own humiliation played out on a 30-foot screen. Brad froze. He stared at the video, his mouth opening and closing. "That is private," Brad stammered. "Turn it off." But the video changed. Now it showed the server room of Barnes Logistics. It showed Brad plugging in the USB drive. It showed him smiling as the files downloaded. It showed the malice in his eyes as he whispered, "I am going to destroy you, old man." This was undeniable proof of corporate espionage. This was a felony caught in 4K resolution. The judges in the audience were no longer looking at Brad with curiosity. They were looking at him with professional scrutiny. Then the final clip played. It was the office of Arthur Sterling. The camera angle was from a hidden lens in the smoke detector I had installed years ago when I suspected Sterling was poaching my staff. It showed Brad slamming the briefcase onto the desk. It showed him accepting the cash. It showed him shaking hands with my enemy. "I will hand you Barnes Logistics on a silver platter," the video, Brad said. The video froze on that frame. Brad shaking hands with Sterling, a look of greedy triumph on his face. The ballroom was silent, but the energy had shifted completely. It was no longer confusion. It was judgment. It was the collective condemnation of 500 honorable people looking at a traitor. Brad turned back to the audience. He looked at the faces of the people he wanted to impress. He saw disgust. He saw loathing. He looked at the briefcase full of cash on the podium. It was not evidence of my crime. It was the smoking gun of his own. He looked at me. For the first time, he truly saw me. He saw that I was not a mechanic who got lucky. He saw the grandmaster who had been 10 moves ahead from the start. "You recorded me," Brad whispered, his voice trembling with terror. "I protect my assets, Brad," I said into the microphone. "And my daughter was an asset I failed to protect from you until now." I stepped forward. Brad shrank back. He looked small. He looked like a child caught stealing from the collection plate. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice booming through the hall, "I apologize for the disruption. You have just witnessed the confession of a man who sold his integrity for a briefcase of cash. This is the man who threw soup in my face because I refused to be his servant. This is the man who abused my daughter because she could not fund his delusions." I looked at Brad with cold, hard eyes. "This is why I have no son-in-law," I declared. As the last word left my lips, the side doors of the ballroom burst open. This was not private security. This was a tactical team from the Economic Crimes Unit, followed by 4 federal agents in windbreakers emblazoned with FBI. They swarmed the stage. They did not hesitate. 2 agents grabbed Brad by the arms. He tried to pull away, tried to grab the briefcase, but they slammed him against the podium. "You have the right to remain silent," an agent shouted, snapping handcuffs onto Brad's wrists. "No," Brad screamed as they hauled him upright. "I was set up. He gave me the virus. It is his fault. Nobody was listening." The evidence was on the screen. The cash was on the podium. The crime was complete. Other agents secured the briefcase as evidence. One agent approached Nia. She stood frozen, looking from the screen to her husband in cuffs. "Nia Miller," the agent asked. Nia looked at me. She looked for her father to save her. She looked for the man who always fixed her mistakes. But I stood still. I did not intervene. I did not wave them away. She had stood by while he threw the soup. She had stood by while he planned the theft. She had been the getaway driver in the wreckage of our family. "I am sorry, Nia," I said softly, off mic. "But you chose your side." The agent took Nia's arm. "Ma'am, you need to come with us for questioning regarding conspiracy and aiding a felon." They dragged Brad kicking and screaming off the stage. He was shouting obscenities, blaming everyone but himself. They led Nia away. Her head hung low, sobbing quietly. The guests parted like the Red Sea to let the officers pass, staring at the fallen couple with a mixture of pity and revulsion. When the doors closed behind them, leaving only the echo of Brad's screams, I turned back to the podium. I signaled the technician to cut the video feed. The screen went black. I looked out at the silent room. I adjusted my cufflinks. I took a deep breath. "Please," I said to the crowd, "forgive the theatrics. The appetizers are being served in the foyer. Let us not let the actions of a few ruin the generosity of the many." The orchestra began to play again. The conversation resumed, louder and more animated than before, but I did not join them. I stepped off the stage and walked toward the exit. My work here was done. The cancer had been cut out. Now it was time to let the wound heal or scar over. I walked out into the cool night air alone but unburdened, leaving the gala behind to deal with the wreckage of the truth I had just unleashed. The handcuffs clicked tight around Brad's wrists, and the sound was like a gavel striking a block, sealing his fate. He was thrashing against the grip of the federal agents, his face a mask of sweaty desperation. He looked at the crowd of elites staring at him with disdain. He looked at the exit signs that were too far away. Then his eyes darted to Nia. She was standing frozen near the edge of the stage, her hands trembling, her makeup ruined by tears. Brad did what cowards always do when the walls close in. He found a human shield. "Wait!" Brad screamed, pulling against the agents. "You have the wrong person. I did not hack the system. I do not know the codes." It was her. He pointed a shaking finger directly at Nia. It was his daughter. She gave me the passwords. She stole the admin key from his office. She told me to do it. She said she wanted her inheritance early. Nia gasped, the sound audible even over the commotion. Her eyes went wide with shock. She had stood by this man through eviction. She had stood by him through the rain and the motel. She had scrubbed toilets next to him. And now, in his first moment of true consequence, he was serving her up to the FBI to save his own skin. "You liar!" Nia shrieked. Her shock instantly converted into a primal blind rage. She did not think about the police. She did not think about the cameras. She lunged. She flew across the few feet separating them and clawed at Brad's face. Her nails raked across his cheek, drawing blood. "You liar!" she screamed again, pounding her fists against his chest. "I did nothing. I trusted you. You ruined everything." Brad yelped, trying to duck away, but he was restrained. "Get her off me!" he yelled. "She is crazy. She is the mastermind." The agents pulled Nia off him. It took two of them to restrain her. She was kicking and screaming, spitting at the husband she had idolized only an hour ago. The crowd watched in horrified silence. This was not just a crime. It was the total implosion of a marriage. It was the ugly, raw center of greed exposed for everyone to see. I watched from the podium. I did not move. I did not feel satisfaction. I felt a cold, heavy stone in my gut. This feral woman screaming on the floor was the little girl I had carried on my shoulders. But that little girl was gone. She had been consumed by the monster she married. The agents separated them, dragging them to opposite sides of the stage. Brad was bleeding, panting, looking around for an escape route that did not exist. Nia was sobbing, her chest heaving as the fight drained out of her, leaving only terror. Then she looked up. She saw me. She saw the man who had paid her tuition, the man who had bought her first car, the man who had silently fixed every mistake she had ever made. She saw her safety net. She shook off the agent arm and ran toward me. The agent moved to stop her, but I held up a hand. "Let her come." Nia threw herself at my feet. She grabbed the legs of my tuxedo pants, burying her face in the fabric. "Daddy, please," she wailed. Her voice was broken, reverting to the tone of a child who had scraped her knee. "You know he is lying. You know I would never steal from you. I did not know about the drive. I did not know about the sale. He tricked me. I am your daughter. I am your Nia. Help me. Tell them to let me go." She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "Please, Dad. I am the victim here. I just wanted us to be happy. I love you. I have always loved you." I looked down at her. Her tears were staining my shoes. For a heartbeat, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to reach down and pull her up and tell the agents to take Brad and leave my girl alone. That is what Etta would have done. Etta would have forgiven her. But Etta was not here. And Etta had not heard what I heard in the motel room. "Nia," I said softly. My voice was amplified by the microphone I was still holding. The entire room leaned in to listen. "You say you love me. You say you respect me." "Yes, Daddy, always." Nia sobbed, nodding frantically. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my phone. It was connected to the Bluetooth system of the ballroom audio. "Then explain this," I said. I pressed play. The sound of the motel room filled the gala hall. It was the audio from the hidden camera, the one clip I had saved for the end. It was recorded the night before when they thought they were alone, when they thought they had won, when they were counting the cash Brad had brought back from Sterling. The voice of Nia rang out clear and sharp. "I cannot wait until we get the money," she was saying on the recording. "I am so sick of pretending. I am sick of his smell. Have you smelled him, Brad? He smells like old oil and cheap soap. He smells like a slave. I wish the old man would just die already so we can sell that dump and live like human beings." The recording ended. The silence in the ballroom was heavier than lead. It was suffocating. The racial slur hung in the air, a toxic cloud that no amount of apologizing could clear. The guests, mostly wealthy people who prided themselves on decorum, looked physically ill. They looked at Nia not with pity, but with revulsion. Nia froze. She was still holding my leg, but her hands had gone limp. She stared at the floor, her face draining of color. She knew there was no coming back from that. She had not just insulted her father. She had insulted my history. She had insulted my skin. She had insulted the labor that paid for the dress on her back. She slowly looked up at me. There was no more pleading in her eyes, only the terrifying realization that she was naked before the world. "Daddy," she whispered, but no sound came out. I stepped back, pulling my leg away from her grasp. She fell forward onto the stage, her hands hitting the wood. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who shared my DNA, but none of my soul. "You are not my daughter," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of anger, devoid of love. It was just a statement of fact. "My daughter died when she let greed eat her heart." I continued. "You are a stranger. You are a broken copy of a man you never bothered to know. You are a shadow of your husband's ambition." I looked at the agents. "Get them out of here," I said. Nia screamed. It was a long, high-pitched sound of pure despair. "No, Daddy, no, please. I am sorry, I did not mean it." The agents grabbed her arms. They hauled her up. She kicked and thrashed, reaching out for me, but I turned my back. I walked to the back of the stage, away from the lights, away from the microphone. I heard them dragging her out. I heard Brad shouting legal threats. I heard the heavy doors of the ballroom slam shut, cutting off their noise. I stood there in the wings for a moment, alone. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer effort of severing a limb to save the body. I had done it. I had cut the cord. I was bleeding, but I was free. I signaled my assistant. It was time to leave. The show was over. The lesson was taught, and the classroom was empty. I walked out the back exit into the night, leaving the gala to whisper about the man who had everything and the daughter who lost it all for a taste of soup she did not cook. The federal courthouse was a cathedral of stone and judgment designed to make everyone inside feel small. I sat in the back row of courtroom 4, my hands resting on my cane, my face a mask of granite. I was not there to testify today. I was there to witness the dissection of a man who thought he was a god. Brad sat at the defense table wearing a suit that was clearly bought off the rack, likely with money borrowed from a payday lender. He looked thin. The arrogance that usually fueled him had been replaced by a twitchy, nervous energy. Beside him, Nia sat with her head down, wearing a gray cardigan, trying to make herself invisible. She was charged as an accomplice, but today was about Brad. Brad had hired a lawyer named Stevenson, a man known for theatrical tactics and billing by the minute. Stevenson stood up and paced in front of the jury box, smoothing his silk tie. He did not look at the evidence. He looked at me. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Stevenson began, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "You have seen the video. You have heard the audio. But context is everything. My client, Mr. Miller, is not a corporate spy. He is a victim. He is a young, ambitious man who was targeted by a father-in-law consumed by jealousy." Stevenson pointed a finger at the back of the room directly at me. "Langston Barnes is a man who spent his life under the hood of a truck." Stevenson continued. "He resents Mr. Miller's education. He resents his class. He resents that his daughter married a man who belongs in a boardroom, not a garage. This was entrapment, pure and simple. Mr. Barnes planted that drive. Mr. Barnes opened the door. Mr. Barnes lured a desperate man into a trap because he wanted to destroy his own daughter's marriage." I watched Brad nod along with the lie. He was trying to sell the narrative that I was the villain, that my wealth was a weapon I used to bully the poor white-collar worker. It was a desperate strategy, relying on the jury's unconscious biases, relying on the idea that a black mechanic could not possibly outsmart a vice president without cheating. Stevenson leaned on the jury rail. "They pushed him to the brink," Stevenson whispered. "They cut off his funds. They evicted him. They starved him until he had no choice but to take the bait. This is not justice. This is a family vendetta orchestrated by a bitter old man with too much money and too much hate in his heart." Nia lifted her head slightly, looking at Brad with a flicker of hope. She wanted to believe it. She needed to believe that they were victims because the alternative was admitting she was a monster. I signaled Monica Lewis, my lawyer, who was sitting with the prosecution team. She stood up. She did not pace. She did not wave her hands. She simply walked to the podium carrying a single thick binder. "Your Honor," Monica said, her voice cutting through the theater of the defense claims Mr. Miller acted out of financial desperation caused by my client. They claim he was a devoted husband trying to provide for his wife. Monica opened the binder. "We would like to introduce evidence regarding the motive for the theft," Monica said, "specifically where the money Mr. Miller stole from his previous employer actually went." Brad froze. He stopped nodding. He looked at the binder, and for the first time, true terror entered his eyes. He reached out and grabbed his lawyer's arm, whispering frantically, but it was too late. "What is this?" Stevenson asked, trying to object. "This is irrelevant. It goes to character and motive, Your Honor," the judge ruled. "Proceed." Monica pulled a transparency sheet and placed it on the projector. It was a bank statement, but it was not from Barnes Logistics. It was from the brokerage firm where Brad had worked before I fired him. Mr. Miller embezzled $400,000 from his previous firm over a period of 3 years, Monica stated. He claimed he was broke. He claimed he needed my client's help to pay rent. But here are the transfers. She pointed to a recurring monthly payment of $5,000. These payments did not go to a landlord, Monica said. They went to an account held by a woman named Elena Rosales. Nia sat up straight. She stared at the screen. Elena. She mouthed the name. She did not know an Elena. Monica flipped to the next slide. It was a lease agreement for a luxury apartment in the upscale Marina District. It was signed by Brad Miller. Mr. Miller maintained a second residence, Monica continued, a residence he visited every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. The courtroom was silent. The jury was leaning in. This was not corporate law anymore. This was a soap opera. And finally, Monica said, placing a birth certificate on the projector. "This is the birth certificate of a male child born 2 years ago. The mother is Elena Rosales. The father is listed as Bradley Miller." The air left the room. Nia made a sound that was not quite a scream and not quite a sob. It was the sound of a lung collapsing. She stared at the screen. A child, 2 years old. While Nia was begging me for money, while Nia was scrubbing toilets, while Nia was standing by her husband through the eviction and the humiliation, Brad had a secret family. He had a son he was supporting with the money he stole. He wasn't stealing to save Nia. He was stealing to maintain his double life. The money Nia thought went to bad investments. The money she thought went to market volatility. It went to Elena. Brad sat like a stone statue. He did not look at the jury. He did not look at me. And he definitely did not look at Nia. He stared at the table, knowing that his defense had just been incinerated. He was not a desperate husband. He was a sociopath. Nia slowly turned her head toward him. Her face was gray. Her eyes were wide and vacant, as if her brain had simply stopped processing reality. "You have a son," she whispered. Brad did not answer. "You have a son," Nia said louder. Brad flinched. "Nia, we can talk about this later," he hissed. "Not here." Later, Nia screamed, standing up. Her chair fell backward with a loud clatter. Later, "You told me we were broke. You told me my father was ruining us. You told me you loved me." She grabbed him. She grabbed the lapels of his cheap suit and shook him. She was small, but in that moment she had the strength of a woman whose entire reality had just shattered. "I betrayed my father for you," she shrieked, her voice tearing at her throat. "I threw my family away for you. I called him a slave for you. And you were laughing at me. You were with her." "Sit down, Ms. Miller," the judge ordered, banging the gavel. Nia did not hear him. She was in a free fall. The memories of the last 5 years crashed into her. Every time she defended him. Every time she lied for him. Every time she asked me for money. It was all for a man who went home to another woman. She looked at me in the back of the room. She saw me sitting there calm and vindicated. She realized then that I knew. I had known about the baby. I had known about the mistress. That was why I had no mercy. That was why I had cut them off. I was not trying to starve her. I was trying to show her the rat she was sleeping with. But she had been too blind to see it. She had chosen the rat over the father. The weight of her choice crushed her. Her knees gave out. She did not faint. She simply crumpled. She slid down Brad's body until she hit the floor, curling into a ball under the defense table. She started to keen a low, animalistic sound of pure grief that made the jurors look away in discomfort. "Get her out of here," the judge ordered. Bailiffs moved in. They had to lift Nia off the floor. She was dead weight. She wasn't fighting anymore. She was broken. They dragged her out of the courtroom, her feet dragging on the carpet, her eyes fixed on nothing. Brad watched her go. He adjusted his jacket. He looked at the jury and tried to shrug as if to say, "Women are crazy." But the jury was not smiling. They looked at him with the cold eyes of executioners. I stood up and buttoned my jacket. I did not need to see the rest. The verdict was already written in the disgust on the jurors' faces. Monica closed her binder. She looked at me and nodded. We had won. But as I walked out of the courtroom passing the spot where my daughter had collapsed, I felt no joy. I had saved my company. I had exposed the truth, but I had watched my only child die inside. It was a necessary death, but it was a death nonetheless. I walked out into the bright afternoon sun, leaving the darkness of the courtroom behind, ready to close the book on the Miller family forever. The double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open, and the air inside the chamber seemed to vanish instantly. The prosecution had called their next witness. It was Elena Rosales. She walked in looking terrified, clutching her purse to her chest. But she was dressed in a white cashmere coat that cost more than the average car. On her ears she wore diamond studs that caught the fluorescent lights of the courtroom. They were large, flawless stones. I recognized them immediately. I had bought a nearly identical pair for Nia as a graduation gift years ago. But these were not Nia's earrings. These were bought with the money Brad had stolen from the accounts Nia thought were for their future. Nia was being led out by the bailiffs, her feet dragging on the carpet. She looked up at the sound of the door opening. Her eyes locked onto Elena. She saw the coat. She saw the diamonds. And then she saw the woman who had been sleeping in the bed, paid for by her own inheritance. Something inside Nia snapped. It was a sound like a dry branch breaking in a dead forest. She let out a scream that was not human. It was the sound of a wounded animal cornered and dying. She threw her weight backward, knocking the bailiff off balance. She spun around, her eyes wide and white with madness. She lunged. She did not run toward the exit. She ran toward the witness stand. She sprinted across the gallery floor, clearing the low wooden railing that separated the public from the court in a single leap. Her target was Elena. "You stole my life," Nia shrieked. Her hands curled into claws. "You are wearing my diamonds. You are living in my house." Elena screamed and tried to scramble backward, but she tripped over her high heels. She fell hard onto the aisle floor. Nia was on top of her in a second. It was a blur of violence. Nia was grabbing handfuls of Elena's hair, slamming her head against the floor. She was tearing at the cashmere coat, ripping the fabric with her bare hands. "I paid for this," Nia screamed, spitting in Elena's face. "I starved for this. I betrayed my father for this. Give it back. Give it all back. The courtroom erupted into chaos. The judge was hammering his gavel so hard I thought the handle would snap. Order, the judge bellowed. Order in this court. Brad had jumped up from the defense table not to help, but to get away. He scrambled backward, overturning his chair, hiding behind his lawyer like a child. He watched the two women in his life destroy each other on the floor of a federal court, and he did not lift a finger. Bailiffs swarmed the pile. It took 3 men to pull Nia off of Elena. Nia was fighting with the strength of the insane. She kicked a bailiff in the shin. She bit the hand of another. She was shouting obscenities that would make a sailor blush, cursing Elena, cursing Brad, and cursing the God that had let this happen. They finally pinned her to the ground. Her face was pressed against the carpet, her hands wrenched behind her back. She was panting, foaming at the mouth, her eyes darting around the room, looking for a target. Elena was helped up by a marshal. She was bleeding from a scratch on her cheek. Her coat was ruined. She looked at Brad with pure hatred before being hurried out of the room for her safety. Get her up, the judge ordered, his face red with fury. Get the defendant up now. They hauled Nia to her feet. She was disheveled. Her cardigan torn, her hair a bird nest of tangles. She looked wild. She looked lost. I sat in the back row, and I felt a cold sweat trickle down my spine. My hands were gripping the wooden armrests of the bench so hard that my knuckles were aching. I wanted to close my eyes. I wanted to look away. But I forced myself to watch. This was the consequence of enabling. This was the result of shielding her from reality for 30 years. I had created a woman who could not handle the word no, and now the world was screaming it at her. The judge leaned over the bench, staring down at Nia with eyes like flint. Ms. Miller, the judge said, his voice dangerously low. This is a court of law, not a street corner. Your behavior is reprehensible. You have assaulted a witness. You have assaulted an officer of the court. I just wanted what was mine, Nia sobbed, her fight replaced by a pitiful weeping. She stole my husband. She stole my money. You are hereby held in direct criminal contempt of court, the judge declared. I am revoking your bail, effective immediately. You are remanded to the custody of the federal marshals. You will be held in isolation until a psychiatric evaluation can be completed. Get her out of my sight. Nia looked up. She looked past the judge. She looked past Brad, who was wiping sweat from his forehead. She looked at me. Daddy, she whimpered. Daddy, help me. They are hurting me. I sat like a statue. I did not move. I did not nod. I did not blink. Inside, my heart was breaking into 1,000 jagged pieces. I wanted to run to her. I wanted to pay any lawyer, any bribe to get her out of those chains. But I knew that if I saved her now, I would lose her forever. She had to hit the bottom, and the bottom was a concrete cell. The marshals dragged her away. She did not fight this time. She went limp, letting them carry her out the side door. The heavy door slammed shut, and the silence that followed was heavy with the ghost of her screams. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of floor wax and old wood. I loosened my grip on the chair. My fingers were stiff. I rubbed my chest, trying to ease the ache where my heart used to be. The judge turned his attention to the defense table. He looked at Brad. Mr. Miller, the judge said, your wife has just destroyed any sympathy this jury might have had for your family. Do you have anything to say before we proceed with the witness? Brad looked at the empty door where Nia had vanished. He looked at the jury box where 12 people were looking at him with expressions ranging from disgust to horror. He knew it was over. The narrative of the poor victimized couple had just been torn apart by Nia's fingernails. He looked at me. Our eyes met across the room. He saw that I was still standing. He saw that I was not broken. He saw that I had won. And Brad Miller could not handle losing. If he was going down, he was going to make sure he burned the whole forest. I have a statement, Brad said, his voice trembling but loud. I want to make a deal. Sit down, Mr. Miller, his lawyer hissed, grabbing his arm. Shut up. No, Brad shouted, shaking him off. I am not going to prison for 20 years for corporate espionage. I have information. I have information about a capital crime. The judge frowned. What are you talking about? I want immunity, Brad said desperately. I want protection. I can give you a conspiracy to commit murder. The courtroom buzzed. The prosecutor stood up. Objection, Your Honor. This is a stalling tactic. It is not a tactic, Brad screamed. He pointed at me. We were going to kill him. The air left the room again. I went still. I felt the blood drain from my face. We planned it. Brad continued, the words spilling out of him like vomit. If the USB drive did not work, If the data was bad, if he fired us, we had a plan B. Naya and I, we talked about it, we bought the stuff. What stuff, the judge asked, leaning forward despite himself. Digoxin, Brad said. It is a heart medication. You can extract it from foxglove plants. It causes cardiac arrest. It looks like a heart attack. We were going to put it in his coffee. He drinks Ethiopian coffee every morning at 8 o'clock sharp. He brews it himself. We were going to switch his grounds. The courtroom erupted. This was not embezzlement. This was not fraud. This was a confession to a plot to assassinate a prominent businessman. Brad was panting, his eyes wild. Naya knew Brad shouted, ensuring he dragged her down to hell with him. She told me where he kept the coffee. She told me when the maid had her day off. We were going to do it next week. We needed the inheritance. We could not wait for him to die of natural causes. He is too healthy. He was never going to die. So we were going to help him. I sat there, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly old. I felt the weight of 68 years crushing my shoulders. My daughter, my Nia. She knew about my coffee. She knew my routine. She knew I had high blood pressure. She had not just wanted my money, she had wanted my life. I looked at Brad, the man I had welcomed into my home, the man I had tried to mentor. He was not just a thief. He was a killer who lacked the courage to pull the trigger. The judge was banging his gavel, but nobody was listening. The jurors were standing up. The prosecutor was shouting for the marshals to seize Brad. The press in the back row were running for the doors to call their editors. But I heard none of it. All I heard was the echo of Nia's voice in my head from years ago asking me how I took my coffee. Black, I had told her. Just black. And now I knew that she had planned to make it the last cup I ever drank. I stood up. My legs felt weak. Monica grabbed my elbow to steady me. Langston, she whispered, her face pale. Did you know? I shook my head. I thought they were greedy Monica. I did not know they were demons. I looked at Brad one last time as the marshals cuffed him and slammed him into the chair. He was weeping now, blubbering about how he was sorry about how he was forced into it. I turned my back on him. I turned my back on the court. I walked down the center aisle, my cane tapping a hollow rhythm on the floor. I walked out of the courthouse and into the blinding light of the afternoon. I took a deep breath of the city air. It tasted like exhaust and rain, but it also tasted like life. I was alive. They had tried to break me. They had tried to bankrupt me. They had tried to kill me. But I was still here. And as I walked toward my car, I made a promise to myself. I would spend every cent of the money they tried to kill me for. I would spend it on people who deserved it. And I would never drink another cup of coffee as long as I lived. The heavy oak doors of the courtroom swung open, but the air outside did not feel lighter. It felt thick with the humidity of a brewing storm. I walked down the marble steps of the federal courthouse, my cane clicking a steady rhythm on the stone. The flash bulbs of the paparazzi popped like distant lightning, blinding and relentless. They shouted questions at me, asking about the verdict, asking about the betrayal, asking how it felt to send my own family to prison. I ignored them. I kept my eyes fixed on the black Rolls-Royce waiting at the curb, its engine purring, a steel beast ready to carry me away from this wreckage. Behind me, the chaos was just beginning. I heard the commotion before I saw it. The side door of the courthouse burst open and Nia stumbled out. She was alone. There were no lawyers flanking her, no husband holding her arm, no entourage to shield her from the glare of the world. She looked like a ghost in the gray afternoon light. Her expensive clothes were wrinkled, her hair was a mess, and her face was swollen from hours of crying in a holding cell. She stood on the sidewalk, blinking against the flashes, looking around wildly. She was searching for a car that wasn't there. She was searching for a life that had evaporated. I paused at the door of my car. I told myself to get in. I told myself to look away. But old habits die hard, and the habit of being her father was the hardest one to break. I watched her. She looked down at her phone. Her fingers were shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She was trying to call a ride, a friend, anyone, but nobody was answering. The friends she had bought with my money had vanished the moment the money did. The socialites she had tried to impress had deleted her number the second the news broke about the poison. She was toxic. She was radioactive. Then she looked up. Across the sea of reporters and curious onlookers, her eyes locked onto mine. It was a look of pure, unadulterated desperation. It was the look of a child who realizes the monsters under the bed are real and the nightlight has burned out. She started to move toward me. She pushed through the crowd, ignoring the microphone shoved in her face. "Daddy," she screamed, her voice cracking. "Daddy, wait!" I stood still. My security detail stepped forward to intercept her, but I raised a hand. "Let her come." I needed to hear this. I needed to see if there was anything left of my daughter in that shell, or if it was just the greed trying to find a new host. She reached me breathless and frantic. She reached out to grab my arm, but stopped herself inches away, remembering the last time she had touched me in the courtroom. "Daddy, please," she sobbed, tears cutting tracks through her ruined makeup. "You heard the judge. $500,000. I don't have it. I don't have anything. Brad took everything. The accounts are frozen. They took my car. They locked the apartment. I am on the street." She looked at the open door of the Rolls-Royce, her eyes hungry for the safety of the leather seats. "Just give me a ride," she begged. "Just take me home. We can talk. I can explain." I was scared. Brad made me do it. I never wanted to hurt you. "I love you, Daddy. You know I love you." I looked at her. I looked deep into her eyes, searching for the truth. But all I saw was a reflection of her own fear. She didn't love me. She loved what I could do for her. She loved the shield I provided against the world. She was terrified of the rain, and I was the only umbrella she knew. "You love me?" I asked, my voice calm and low, barely audible over the noise of the street. "Yes," Nia cried, nodding vigorously. "More than anything, I am your daughter." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen and brought up the recording from the courtroom. The confession. "You knew about the coffee," I said. "You told him when the maid had her day off." Nia flinched as if I had slapped her. Her face went pale. That was talk," she stammered. "Just talk. We were venting. We would never have done it." "You bought the poison," I said. "The FBI found the receipt in Brad's cloud account. You bought it with the card I gave you." She went silent. The lie died in her throat. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, searching for a defense that didn't exist. I put the phone away. "You don't love me, Nia," I said. "You don't even know me. You love the lifestyle I gave you, and you were willing to kill me to keep it." "No, Daddy, please," she wailed, falling to her knees on the sidewalk. "Don't leave me here. I have a debt, $500,000. How am I supposed to pay that? I have never had a job. I don't know how to work. I will go to jail if I don't pay." "You will learn," I said. "It is amazing what you can learn when you are hungry." I turned to get into the car. "Daddy," she shrieked, grabbing the hem of my jacket. "You can't do this. You have the money. It is nothing to you. You can write a check right now and save me." "Why won't you save me?" I looked down at her hand on my jacket. I gently peeled her fingers off the fabric. "I am saving you, Nia," I said. "I am saving you from becoming your husband. I am saving you from the illusion that actions don't have consequences." I stepped into the car. The leather seat was cool and comfortable. I looked at her one last time. She was kneeling on the concrete, surrounded by strangers who were filming her breakdown. "The restitution money," I said through the open door. "The $500,000. Yes," she asked, a flicker of hope lighting her eyes. "You will pay it?" "No," I said. "You will pay it. Every cent." "And do you know where it is going?" She shook her head, confused. "To the company." "To you I am donating it," I said. "Every dollar you scrape together, every penny you earn scrubbing floors or waiting tables will be donated to the United Negro College Fund. It will go to educate young black men and women who respect their history and their elders. You will be working for them now." Her jaw dropped. The cruelty of the justice stunned her. She wasn't just paying a fine. She was funding the very people she had looked down on. "Goodbye, Nia," I said. "You can't leave me," she screamed, lunging for the door. "You are my father. You owe me." I pulled the door shut. The heavy thud cut off her voice. I watched through the tinted glass as she pounded on the window, her face twisted in a mask of rage and grief. My security team gently but firmly pulled her away. "Driver," I said, "go." The car pulled away from the curb, merging into the traffic. I watched her in the rearview mirror until she was just a small, dark figure on the sidewalk, alone in the middle of the city she thought she ruled. I sat back in the seat and closed my eyes. The silence in the car was absolute. I reached for the bottle of water in the console and took a sip. It was cool and clean. I pulled out my phone one last time. I went to her contact. Nia, my baby girl, my greatest failure. I pressed the block button. Confirm block, the screen asked. I pressed yes. I put the phone down. I looked out the window at the passing city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. It was a beautiful evening. I was alone. I was tired. But for the first time in 5 years, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. The shoe had dropped, the soup had been thrown, and I was still standing. I was Langston Barnes. I had built an empire from nothing. I had survived poverty. I had survived racism. I had survived the death of my wife. And now I had survived my own family. I took a deep breath. I had work to do. I had a foundation to run. I had scholarships to fund. I had a legacy to rebuild, one that wasn't based on blood but on character. The car sped up, carrying me toward the hills, toward my quiet, empty house, toward the rest of my life. And as the city lights flickered on around me, I finally felt the warmth return to my face, washing away the memory of the hot soup, leaving only the cool, clean feeling of freedom. The neon sign of the diner flickered with a buzzing sound that was driving Nia insane. It was 3 a.m, and the air inside the restaurant smelled of burnt grease, stale coffee, and despair. Nia wiped the counter with a rag that was gray with age. Her hands, once manicured and soft, were now red and chapped from the harsh cleaning chemicals. Her feet, swollen in cheap non-slip shoes, throbbed with a dull ache that never went away. She was 24 hours into a double shift because she needed the overtime to pay the rent on her studio apartment, a basement unit with one window that looked out onto a brick wall. "Hey, sweetie, I am waiting on my refill," a truck driver shouted from booth 4. He waved his empty mug in the air. "I am coming," Nia said, her voice hoarse. She grabbed the coffee pot. It was heavy. Her wrist popped. She walked over to the booth, trying to keep a smile plastered on her face. A year ago, she would have looked at a man like this with disdain. A year ago, she would have called the manager if her coffee was not the right temperature. Now she was the one pouring it. She filled the mug. The driver watched her, not with gratitude, but with a leering gaze that made her skin crawl. "You should smile more," he said, reaching out to grab her wrist. "A pretty girl like you looks better when she smiles." Nia pulled her hand away, spilling a few drops of hot coffee on the table. "Hey, watch it!" The driver snapped, his mood shifting instantly. "You are clumsy." "I am sorry," Nia stammered, grabbing napkins to wipe the spill. "I am so sorry, sir." Her manager, a man named Rick, who had sweat stains on his shirt and a permanent scowl, stormed out of the kitchen. "What is the problem here?" Rick barked. "She spilled coffee on me," the driver complained. "She is useless." Rick turned on Nia. His face was inches from hers. He smelled of onions and cigarettes. "You are clumsy," Nia, Rick shouted. "This is the 3rd time this week. One more mistake and you are out. Do you hear me? You are fired. Now clean this up and get table 6 their order." Nia nodded, blinking back tears. "Yes, Rick. I am sorry." She scrubbed the table, feeling the eyes of the other customers on her. She felt small. She felt invisible. She felt exactly how she had made me feel for 5 years. The universe had a cruel sense of humor. It had put her in my shoes and forced her to walk a mile in them on a floor covered in grease. She went back to the kitchen to pick up an order of fries. As she walked through the swinging doors, she caught her reflection in the stainless steel refrigerator. She looked 10 years older. The arrogance was gone. The entitlement was gone. All that was left was a tired woman trying to survive. She walked back out into the dining room carrying the tray. The bell above the front door chimed, signaling a new customer. Nia did not look up. She just hoped it was not a drunk group from the bars. "Welcome to Joe's, sit anywhere you like," she called out mechanically. She put the fries down at table 6 and turned around to greet the new guest. She froze. The tray slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the floor, but she did not hear it. Standing in the doorway was a man in a charcoal wool coat and a fedora. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and held himself with a quiet dignity that sucked the oxygen out of the room. He looked out of place among the vinyl booths and the ketchup bottles. He looked like a king who had wandered into a stable. It was me. Nia stared at me. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at my shoes, polished Italian leather. She looked at my face, calm and unreadable. "Daddy," she whispered. I did not smile. I did not open my arms. I simply took off my hat and walked to a small booth near the window. I sat down and placed my hands on the table. Nia ran to me. She did not care about the manager. She did not care about the customers. She saw a lifeline. She saw her father. "Daddy, you came," she sobbed, reaching for my hands. "Oh God, you came. I knew you would not leave me here. Please take me home. I cannot do this anymore. I am so sorry. I have learned my lesson. Please, Daddy, get me out of here." I looked at her hands. They were rough. Her fingernails were short and unpolished. She was shaking. I pulled my hands back, gently placing them in my lap. "I would like to see a menu, please," I said. Nia stopped crying. She blinked, confused. "What?" "A menu," I repeated. "And a glass of water. No ice." Nia stared at me. The realization hit her slowly. I was not here to rescue her. I was here as a customer. "But Daddy," she stammered. "Miss the manager," Rick shouted from across the room. "Do not bother the customers. Take his order or clock out." Nia flinched. She looked at Rick, then back at me. She saw the resolve in my eyes. She realized she had no choice. She wiped her face with her apron. She took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her notepad. "What can I get for you, sir?" she asked, her voice trembling. I looked at her. I really looked at her. I saw the fatigue. I saw the fear. But I also saw something else. Resilience. She was still standing. She was still working. She had not crumbled completely. "I will have the soup," I said. Nia's pen hovered over the paper. "The soup?" "Yes," I said. "The vegetable soup. And bring some crackers." She wrote it down. Her hand was shaking so bad the writing was illegible, but she nodded. Right away she whispered. She walked to the kitchen. I watched her go. I watched her shoulders hunch as she passed the manager. I watched her grab the ladle and pour the soup into a bowl. I watched her carefully place it on a tray, making sure not to spill a drop. She brought it to me. She placed it in front of me with a trembling hand. "Is there anything else, sir?" she asked, reverting to the formal script, because she did not know what else to say. "No, thank you," I said. I picked up my spoon. I ate slowly. I tasted every spoonful. It was watery and salty. Nothing like the lobster bisque Brad had thrown in my face, but to me it tasted like progress. Nia stood by the counter watching me. She watched me eat the food she had served. She watched me wipe my mouth with a paper napkin. She was crying, silently, tears rolling down her cheeks, but she did not come over. She stayed at her post. She refilled coffee for the truck driver. She cleaned a table. She worked. For the first time in her life, she was earning her living while I watched. She was serving me not because I demanded it, but because it was her job. I finished the soup. I pushed the bowl away. I signaled for the check. Nia brought it over. She placed the slip of paper face down on the table. "It is on the house," she whispered. "I will pay for it. Please, Dad, just talk to me." I looked at her. I saw the desperation. She wanted a connection. She wanted to know that she still had a father. I pulled out my wallet. I took out a $10 bill and placed it on the table, covering the cost of the soup. Then I reached into the inside pocket of my coat. I pulled out a white envelope. It was sealed. I placed it on the table next to the money. "This is for you," I said. Nia reached for it, her eyes lighting up. She thought it was a check. She thought it was cash. She thought it was her salvation. "Do not open it until I leave," I said. I stood up. I put my hat back on. I looked at the diner one last time. I looked at the manager who was counting cash at the register. I looked at the truck driver who was asleep in his booth. And I looked at my daughter who was standing there in a stained uniform holding an envelope like it was a holy relic. "You are doing a good job, Nia," I said. Her eyes widened. It was the first compliment I had given her in 2 years. I turned and walked out the door. The bell chimed behind me. I walked to my car, the cool night air hitting my face. I did not look back. Inside the diner, Nia waited until the door closed. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely tear the flap of the envelope. She ripped it open, expecting to see green bills, expecting to see enough money to pay her rent for a year. She turned the envelope upside down. A single folded brochure fell out. She frowned. She picked it up. It was a glossy pamphlet for the City Community College nursing program. It was not money. It was not a check. She opened the brochure. Inside, tucked into the fold, was a handwritten note on my personal stationery. She read it. "Nia, you asked for money. Money is easy. Money is what got you here. You need something harder. You need purpose. This is a full scholarship for the licensed practical nurse program. The tuition is paid. The books are paid. But you have to go to class. You have to study. And you have to pass. You spent your whole life wanting people to serve you. You threw soup because you thought you were above service. Now you are going to learn the truth. The highest calling is not to be served, it is to serve. Learn how to take care of people who are sick, who are weak, who cannot help themselves. Learn how to clean a wound. Learn how to hold the hand of someone who is dying. Learn how to care for others before you ever ask anyone to care for you again. If you graduate, I will be at the ceremony. Until then, keep the change. Dad. Nia stared at the note. She looked at the brochure. She looked at the $10 bill on the table. She felt a sob rise in her throat, but she swallowed it down. She looked at the truck driver who was waking up and coughing. She looked at the manager who was glaring at her. She wiped her tears. She put the brochure and the note into her pocket next to her heart. She picked up the $10 and put it in the register. She grabbed the coffee pot. "Coffee, sir?" she asked the truck driver. He nodded. She poured it. She did not spill a drop. Outside, I watched from my car as she went back to work. She was not the girl I raised. She was becoming the woman I hoped she could be. I started the engine and drove away, leaving her to finish her shift, leaving her to start her life. The iron gates of my estate swung open silently, welcoming me back to a home that had felt like a mausoleum for 5 years. For the first time since Etta died, the silence inside the house did not feel empty. It felt peaceful. It felt clean. I walked through the grand foyer, my footsteps echoing on the marble, but I did not feel the crushing weight of loneliness that usually greeted me. I felt the lightness of a man who had finally taken out the trash. But a house this size was not meant for one man alone. It was built for a legacy. It was built to shelter the future. And since my biological future had chosen to rot on the vine, I knew I had to graft a new branch onto the tree. The next morning, I drove my truck down to the community center in the neighborhood where I grew up. It was a brick building that had seen better days, the paint peeling and the basketball hoops rusted. Inside, I found the auto shop vocational program. It was underfunded and overcrowded, filled with young men and women who were looking for a way out of the struggle. I stood in the back, watching. I saw a young man in the corner. He was skinny, wearing coveralls that were stained with oil. He was working on a transmission that looked like it had been pulled out of a river. Other students were joking around, checking their phones, but this boy was laser-focused. His hands moved with a rhythm I recognized. It was the rhythm of a man who speaks the language of machines. I walked over to him. "What are you working on, son?" I asked. He looked up. He had intelligent eyes, but they were guarded. He saw an old man in a nice coat. He wiped his hands on a rag. "Trying to salvage this gearbox, sir," he said, his voice respectful but firm. "The casing is cracked, but the gears are still good. I think I can machine a new housing if I can get access to the CNC mill." "Why bother?" I asked. "It is junk." "It is not junk," he said, defending the metal. "It just needs someone to see its value. If I fix this, I can sell it. If I sell it, I can buy tools. If I have tools, I can work." I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had felt on my face in weeks. "What is your name, son?" "Malik," he said. "Malik Johnson." "Do you have family, Malik?" He looked down at the transmission. "Just my grandmother, sir. She raised me. She is sick right now, so I am trying to pick up extra hours here." I looked at his hands. They were covered in grease. They were the hands of a builder. They were the hands of a man who would never throw soup in anyone's face because he knew exactly what it cost to put food on the table. I took a card out of my pocket. It was not a business card. It was a personal card with a handwritten number on the back. "My name is Langston Barnes," I said. "I own Barnes Logistics." Malik's eyes widened. He knew the name. Everyone in the neighborhood knew the name. "I am looking for an apprentice," I said. "Not a janitor. A protege. Someone I can teach how to build an empire, not just how to fix a gearbox." Malik stared at the card, then at me. "Why me?" he asked. "Because you see value where others see junk," I said. "And because you are working while everyone else is playing." "I want you to come to my office tomorrow," I continued. "Bring your grandmother. I am going to make sure she has the best doctors in the city. And then I am going to put you to work. You are going to learn every aspect of my business from the loading dock to the boardroom. I am going to pay for your education. I am going to give you the chance I wish someone had given me when I was your age." Malik looked like he was about to cry, but he held it back. He stood up straighter. He wiped his hand on his coveralls again and extended it. "I will not let you down, Mr. Barnes," he said. I shook his hand. It was a firm grip. It was a promise. "I know you won't," I said. I walked out of the community center feeling a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the sun. I had not replaced my daughter. You cannot replace a child. But I had found a place for the love I still had to give. I had found a vessel that would not leak. A week later, I sat in the library of my estate with Monica Lewis. The table was covered in documents. These were not court filings or eviction notices. These were the blueprints for the future. The coffee on the table was black and bitter just the way I liked it. I took a sip, savoring the taste of safety. I knew nobody had tampered with it. Monica pushed a thick stack of papers toward me. "This is the final draft, Langston," she said. "The Etta and Langston Barnes Foundation." I looked at the papers. This was where the money was going. This was where the inheritance Nia had demanded was being redirected. The foundation had a dual mandate. Half of the endowment would go to scholarships for students like Malik, young black men and women with the drive to succeed, but without the means to get there. We were going to build a new generation of leaders who understood the value of hard work and respect. The other half of the endowment was for something more personal. We were establishing a legal defense fund and a network of safe houses for elderly people who were being abused or exploited by their families. "We are calling it the Guardian Project," Monica explained. "We have already hired 3 full-time investigators and a team of social workers. We are going to provide free legal representation to any senior citizen who is being coerced into signing over their assets or who is being threatened by their children." I picked up my pen. I thought about the fear I had felt when I realized my own daughter wanted me dead. I thought about the thousands of other parents sitting in silence, afraid to speak up because they did not want to lose their families. "I am going to be their voice," I said. I signed the papers. The ink flowed smoothly onto the page. With that signature, I transferred the bulk of my liquid assets into the trust. I was no longer a billionaire on paper. I was just a man with a comfortable home and a job to do. It felt incredible. The weight of the money had always been a burden. It had attracted wolves. It had corrupted my child. Now it was a weapon for good. It was a shield for the vulnerable. Monica took the papers and placed them in her briefcase. She looked at me with a soft expression. "Etta would be proud, Langston," she said. I looked out the window at the setting sun. "I hope so," I said. "I really hope so." I stood up. I had one last stop to make, one last conversation to have. "Thank you, Monica," I said, "for everything." I walked her to the door. As she drove away, I got into my car. I did not take the truck. I took the Rolls-Royce. I drove it myself. I enjoyed the feel of the steering wheel, the power of the engine. I was done hiding. I was done pretending to be small to make others feel big. I drove to the cemetery on the outskirts of the city. It was an old cemetery filled with oak trees and moss. I parked the car and walked up the hill to the plot where Etta was buried. The grass was green and perfectly manicured. The headstone was simple polished granite with her name and dates. I stood there for a long time. The wind rustled the leaves of the trees. It was a quiet evening. The city was just a hum in the distance. I took a single black rose from inside my coat and placed it on the stone. "Hello, Etta," I said. I waited as if expecting an answer, but there was only the wind. "I did it, Etta," I said. I broke the promise. I did not protect her. I let her fall. I felt a tightness in my throat. "She wanted to kill me, Etta," I whispered. "She bought the poison. She hated me. She hated us." I looked at the name on the stone. "I know you wanted me to save her," I said. But I realized that saving her would have meant destroying everything we built. It would have meant letting evil win. And I could not do that. I could not let your sacrifice be for nothing. I touched the cold stone. "She is on her own now," I said. "She is scrubbing floors. She is learning what it means to be tired. She is learning what it means to be invisible. It is the hardest lesson a parent can teach, but it is the only one she will listen to." I stood up straighter. The guilt that had been gnawing at me for weeks began to fade. It was replaced by a sense of clarity. I had not failed Nia. I had given her everything. She had chosen to throw it away. Her failure was her own. "I have started the foundation," I told the stone. "We are going to help people, Etta. We are going to help people who deserve it. We are going to protect the old folks who have nobody. And I found a boy. His name is Malik. You would like him. He has grease under his fingernails and fire in his belly. He reminds me of me." The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the graveyard. The air grew cool. "I am going to be okay, Etta," I said. "I am going to live. I am going to drink my coffee. I am going to listen to my jazz. And I am going to walk with my head high." I turned away from the grave. I did not look back. I walked down the hill toward my car. My stride was long and sure. I did not need the cane. I carried it only as an accessory, a symbol of the authority I had reclaimed. I was Langston Barnes. I was a mechanic. I was a CEO. I was a survivor. I got into my car and started the engine. I drove out of the cemetery gates and back onto the main road. The road stretched out before me wide and open. I had a business to run. I had a protege to teach. I had a life to finish living. And as I drove under the streetlights, I thought about the soup. I thought about the heat and the shame. And I smiled. Because they were right about one thing. That was exactly what I deserved. I deserved to see the truth. I deserved to be free of the lies. I deserved to know who was standing with me and who was standing behind me with a knife. The soup had washed away the blindness, and now I could see everything clearly. "Don't ever judge a book by its worn cover," I said to the empty car, my voice strong and sure. "And never ever throw soup in the face of the man who cooked it for you. Because you do not know if the next bowl you have to eat will be filled with your own tears." I drove into the night, a free man, leaving the past in the rearview mirror where it belonged. The future was waiting, and for the first time in a long time I was ready to meet it. This story reminds us that true power never needs to shout to be heard. Langston Barnes taught us that dignity and integrity are far more valuable than any penthouse or luxury car. It serves as a powerful warning never to mistake silence for weakness, nor humility for poverty. Brad and Nia learned the hardest way possible that when you treat people like stepping stones, you eventually run out of ground to walk on. True wealth isn't just about the balance in your bank account. It is about the legacy you build and how you treat those who can do nothing for you. Respect must be earned, never demanded. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and let me know in the comments. Would you have forgiven Nia?